What's up, everybody? I am here with my good friend and ally, S-Man Speaks, and we're going to be talking about ideologies and what is stereotypically associated with them regarding beliefs and the people who follow them, and just talk about that subject mainly. Now, to give everyone a recap on this subject, how the idea of this type of stream came up was that I cannot remember what stream it was that
Oh, I
I
know what you're
heard you
talking
say
about.
it, S-Man, but
It was on the
what
abortion debate I had with Humane Mind, his brother, Saomi, Aspie, and Son of Lucifer.
maybe I don't
Didn't know
know.
that was the debate because you were getting a little edgy and that you were having a bit of a problem because I said because I saw War Corpse's video challenge at the time to conservatives who on abortion, and I said I don't know how exactly I got to the topic, but I did say I'm fiscally conservative. Um, but it was but I wasn't sure if certain positions I had would be of a conservative standpoint. Um, that's how, and then I said, hey, you want to have a stream about conservatism, and then we decided let's just go with ideologies instead.
Yep.
Um, so conservatives they get stereotyped as anti-gay people, they anti-abortion, anti a lot of progressive type of things. I would say I'm conservative when it comes to affirmative action, gun control, capital punishment, but in other places like abortion,
Oh, Lonely Wolf.
hey, Lonely Wolf.
Uh,
When it comes to things like abortion, same sex marriage, separation of church and state, I do take a liberal standpoint on those topics. Um, and simply put, I've always viewed um, those like the I take a liberal stance on some things, I take conservative stance on others. Should not be a bad thing. People, however, when you tell them you're liberal or conservative, they are extremely quick to strawman or to use the guilt by association fallacy. Oh my God, Zach Edwards is a conservative. That means he must want to overturn the Supreme Court decision in favor of legalizing same-sex marriage. Or oh my God, Lonely Wolf might be a conservative in some areas and maybe a bit progressive in others. I think that's what you said. Or oh my God, he's so progressive. That means we must abandon all things traditional. Like they don't even ask why you hold that position. They're just quick to stereotype you, use the ad hominems, and a
Oh
whole lot
my
of other
gosh.
fallacies.
Oh my gosh, he's a liberal. That must mean that he thinks that Obama is the best president of all time. Oh my gosh, he's a conservative. That must mean that he likes George Bush.
Yeah.
That stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't thinking at all that you were conservative all around. Because obviously, quite obviously, you aren't. But it's just in that stream that you almost seemed like you're giving off the implication that you were only conservative when it comes to fiscal. Like, wait, what? No,
Fiscally
not really.
conservative. That's what I
Yeah,
had said. Yeah,
you're
I was not.
fiscally conservative. You're also conservative when it comes to gun rights, when it comes to immigration, among
Affirmative
a
action.
few other issues. Yeah, affirmative action as well. I kind of put affirmative action more or less, well, I don't know. I guess you could say, I don't know if you would classify that as an economics issue or a social issue, maybe just a
Maybe a bit
combination
of a
of
social
both.
issue.
Yeah, because it has to do with business. Affirmative action does, making sure that businesses do not discriminate based on race on who they want to hire or not.
I say if you want to hire somebody and they're qualified, regardless of what they are, just hire them. Like this whole we have to have a certain amount of people here, here, and here. Fuck that. Just hire somebody that's qualified for the job. Like this affirmative action bullshit just seems like it's trying to make up for bad things that happened in the past, and to me, that's just being a total bitch.
Um, yeah. Well,
I mean,
what are the different political parties there in Australia, Lonely Wolf? Just out of curiosity.
it's sort of it's not as split as it's not as obvious as blatantly obvious as the difference between, let's say, like Democrat and Republican. How you associate one with the left and one with the right. It's kind of, I mean, the two major parties are Labor and Liberal. So Labor is kind of, economically it's more I guess, on the left a little bit. But then the Liberal Party, it's slightly more to the right, but it'll be declared more as a centrist position than anything else. And so to have a conservative, any sort of conservative party, those are usually independent parties, because there's one called One Nation. It's sort of espouses a lot of conservative values, and then there's obviously the Greens Party. It's probably further to the left than all of them, and there's even like a Socialist Party or whatever. But the two main ones, it's hard to really tell the difference because there's not many people who are like exclusively loyal to one, saying that I'm a dedicated Labor person for life, because it's going to depend on who the Prime Minister is at the time. It's like, because we've had good Prime Ministers on both ends of on both sides, really, from Labor and Liberal.
Okay, yeah, and you say that the Liberal Party is basically like economically on the right, correct?
Yeah, it's probably more right wing, and overall, it would be more of a centrist party, because they actually came out and said that the Prime Minister said that this is a centrist party.
Okay, yeah, I kind of want to dive into the labeling of classical liberal, like Dave Rubin likes to throw around a lot, and a lot of people get worked up at the fact that he still wants to call himself a liberal. Like, I think that. Actually, I do not know if Dave Rubin still considers himself a leftist. I mean, it seems kind of, it's hard to get a grip on what that guy's political compass is, honestly. But my only guess is that he is trying to like take back the language on what a liberal is, because liberal back in the olden days would have been somebody like me, but then it got hijacked by economic leftists to, or at least here in America. I mean, for you in Australia, Lonely Wolf, it doesn't seem as much that way. But here in America, it seems that economic leftists have like hijacked the meaning of the word liberal to mean a progressive, basically. And because Dave Rubin is classifying himself as a liberal, that must that kind of pisses them off. I mean, particularly Saw Hill, or whatever the fuck his name is, of Progressive Voice. If you guys had ever heard of him,
I haven't, and
I think his name is Saw Hill, at least. I mean, what the fuck? Saw Hill? That's like the name of a wrestler or something. That's what it makes me think
His parents must have hated him.
Yeah. I'm looking at the kid, and I'm thinking to myself, guy, you are some, okay, you are some protein shakes too few and some Twinkies too many of being a pro wrestler, guy. So I don't think the name Saw Hill really suits you. I mean, that's an obvious ad hominem right there, but I don't care.
It's not an ad hominem. You're just insulting him. Like, he didn't make an argument, and you're like, "Oh my god, you've had this too many and this too few." But yeah, like liberalism.
Yeah.
If you look at its definition and its ideology, they don't have an issue with the free market. So it does make it sound like, oh, they're kind of not too opposed to capitalism, or something like that. There's also conservative and liberal. Those terms absolutely, yeah, they do mean different things in other nations. For instance, or at least in other parts of the world. For instance, in Europe, if you call yourself a libertarian, they might think, oh, libertarian socialist. But if you say you're a libertarian in America, they're going to think of you as more of you're in favor of things like laissez-faire capitalism, minimal government. Well, that's the conservatives, but I've seen that overlap between conservatives and libertarians.
Yeah, the conservatives and libertarians a lot when it comes to economic issues. Although I think libertarians approach economics, generally speaking, a whole lot more articulately than conservatives generally will. I mean, that's just been my observation. I mean, particularly when I compare like libertarian YouTubers who go talking about economics to like conservatives like Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, or Bill O'Reilly. The libertarian YouTubers are far more articulate.
Yeah, and also I've seen that with the libertarians.
Hi, Loudmouth.
Hey, Loudmouth. I've seen with the libertarians, they are more fiscally conservative, socially liberal, which I can actually very much agree with them on. I believe I strongly agree with a lot of tenets of it. Minimal government, as I believe the government has gotten too big for its britches, and in other areas it fails us. For instance, you could get a life sentence for smoking pot, or you get a harsh sentence for smoking pot, yet a child rapist could get, like, I don't know, just 10 years in prison, or a rapist could get 3 or 6 months in prison, like Brock Turner might ring a bell. You know, I mean, up a lot when sentencing guidelines are that insanely retarded. You know.
All right.
So I was wondering about making more movie streams, but I would have to make my voice 1,000 times more annoying.
Are you referring to that one guy that you interviewed about Star Wars?
Oh,
that stream was cringe. Loudmouth says, I found Loudmouth on YouTube, big fan. Like, I had to click off your stream for a second because I'm like, fuck, that was cringe. Just
it made you want to throw up.
It was funny when the look on his face when he was muted. It looked like he'd like taken a fidget spinner away from him.
Yeah, I had to keep muting the guy because he kept interrupting people, and I wanted other people besides him to talk. You know.
Yeah.
So Loudmouth, you consider yourself I heard you say that you're a libertarian, but you're a right-leaning libertarian. Like, if you were to take the political compass test, you'd be in the lower right quadrant of the compass.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, obviously, you were arguing against the minimum wage with Cult of Ham, that one stream a few days back.
Correct.
That was quite the debate, actually. Quite entertaining. I mean, there was some areas of where that Cult of Ham and Humane Mind were surprisingly decent, and then there was this one point where they were really explosive at each other. I cannot remember what exactly it was, but Cult of Ham said something along the lines of, do you really want people to be out in rags or dressed in rags, homeless on the streets or whatnot? You have to have fine clothing to get a job. And then that just really pissed off Humane Mind. He was all like, oh, don't get me started on that. Don't get me started on that. I was able to get a job when I was homeless, and so on and so forth. And I was like, whoa.
I do remember
Humane
seeing
Mind going berserk.
Oh, you should have seen him, like, after, like, his 5-hour live stream near the end. He was just the only one there telling a story, trying to clarify what he said earlier, and he started to cry, and I'm like, oh shit.
Humane started to cry?
Yeah, it was him relaying when he was homeless and how it made him.
I was once homeless. Jeez.
Yeah, he did struggle through that for about a month or so.
I guess I did not watch the entire stream.
Oh, it's near the end. You're you near the end. Like, I think, like, from 4 hours 40 minutes to the end, he tells the story of what happened and how from 2013 or something to, like, he did have a lot of financial troubles and he was homeless, I think, at least twice, he said. But you'd have to watch that stream for the full context. Near the end, of course.
I was around for most of it, like from the very beginning to like 4 hours in. I mean, I was listening to the whole thing. I would have joined, except I had already that same morning got out some ground beef to make dinner, and at that point it was too late. I did not want to refreeze it just to make the thawing process of that ground beef be all for nothing. So yeah, I was doing dishes and making myself dinner. Otherwise, I would have joined.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
You go mentioning of how moderate liberals are typically capitalist. Yeah, they have like a whole lot of capitalist beliefs, like when it comes to luxuries and whatnot. I mean, Owen McDonald, he tried to use video games as a wedge issue to try and push for socialism. Like, can there be any more petty of an issue to try to use as a wedge for socialism? But moderate liberals, they might believe in some ideas that are similar to socialists, like a higher minimum wage, or single-payer healthcare, or paid-for college and whatnot. But when it comes to luxuries like video games, they'll be all like, all right, yeah, let the capitalists have their way. And since we're here on this stream, when I hear somebody say that they're a capitalist, I don't usually think of somebody like Cult of Ham, to be quite honest. I mean, he calls himself a capitalist, but really, I don't know, you could call him like a quasi-capitalist or something like that. Because when I think of a true capitalist, I think of somebody like Milton Friedman or somebody who is more to the economic right.
Well, there are people who are on the there are people on the left who I guess are socially left wing and can be economically right wing, and then you got people that are like Cult to Ham. He wants a mixed economy, take some bits of socialism and capitalism. Right. That's kind of what he's striving for.
I'm pretty much the same.
Yeah, he's probably the furthest to the left in the Cancer podcast, and he's probably, I don't know who's more libertarian, either him or Milner Man is more libertarian, but either way, it's like, at the end of the day, it's kind of how I've seen it. I've seen the Cancer podcast is quite divided when it comes to things like religion, abortion, politics. Like we're diverse in that way. So sure, we don't have the token trans person or the token person, but we do have a token trans person. And the token.
Didn't Naomi leave the Cancer podcast?
No, I think she's still there. Either like I wouldn't have blamed her if she would have left because it gets quite quite cancerous.
I mean, well, there haven't been
nothing against Naomi for that, but I think she did. I think Naomi left you.
I'm gonna go check the chat. He may join in about 10-15 minutes. I'm gonna go check the chat. All right.
There haven't been like reading like debates in the chat group regarding abortion. Any discussion on abortion is immediately taken on a live stream, but for some reason when it comes to economics, religion, morality, objective versus subjective, for example, apparently Cult of Ham and Humane Mind, they just have some unending urge for some reason to just keep it in the chat and not take it to a damn stream. Like if you come on guys, make the debate go on record on a stream, you know.
Check what I got.
Yeah, she did leave us. I don't.
What is that? What is that?
What's it look like?
I can't tell. Your camera's pretty glitchy, mate. Oh,
yeah, it's
a
kind
game.
of fuzzy.
It's a game. Pull up your pants, dude. For fuck's sake.
Here, it's. Is it better now?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, huh?
Yeah.
Is it like some vintage Atari type of stuff?
It's a Super Nintendo Classic Edition. It's got like a bunch of preloaded Super Nintendo games and it hooks up to a modern television. It's designed to look like the old console. That thing was launched almost a decade before S-Man was born on my 5th birthday. On my 5th birthday, my parents bought me the original Super Nintendo.
Yeah, well, congratulations on getting yourself a vintage item. You know what? I'm going to turn on my camera as well.
Well, it's not really vintage. It's new. This device, it's new. It just launched this year. It has a lot of like old games on it. This hooks up to a modern television, whereas the original Super Nintendo doesn't hook up to a modern TV. It doesn't have HDMI ports.
Yeah. When it comes to going back to what Zach was, I've been meaning to ask you. So, how did you get involved with politics? How did you get involved with some of the topics like that you're in favor and against? I'll go to your channel to pull up the list, but you know what I'm asking, right?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Well, I was raised listening to Rush Limbaugh for most of my childhood, which is sad to say, right? And then for my later childhood, I was raised listening to Mark Levin, as he was a more impressive speaker. And
I greatly prefer Mark Levin to Rush Limbaugh. I used to actually like Rush Limbaugh for a time, but I turned away from him because he doesn't talk about conservatism or his principles anymore. You listen to his show now; it's all this BS populism. All right, the people versus the establishment bullshit. That has nothing to do with conservative principles. It's just populist bullshit.
Yeah,
more particular right-leaning populism. But yeah, as far as my constitutionalism, that's what Mark Levin, where Mark Levin comes in. Because when it was just listening to Rush Limbaugh, I guess I looked at everything just purely from a right-leaning, these are my beliefs just because they're my beliefs type of issue. But Mark Levin, he kind of gave me more of a constitutional perspective on it. He talks more about the founding fathers and the history around the founding, and it's just awesome. Like a whole lot of my beliefs are based on the Constitution. Sorry.
Afraid to hold Trump's feet to the fire when Trump does something he disagrees with. Whereas if you know who I hate, like fucking despise, Sean Hannity. Watch that. All right, that should his voice channel. Okay, his live show should be on Pornhub because every single session, single show lately is just him sucking Trump's dick. That's all he does. He doesn't do anything else. All right, it's pornography. The Sean Hannity show is pornography. All right.
Wow. I'm loving it. That's exactly what I think about Sean Hannity, is that basically it's just a giant Trump dick sucking. Like, actually,
Levin does attack Trump every now and then. Yeah.
You could kind of put Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity actually in competition with each other on who can suck the most dick of Trump's.
Rush is pretty bad on that regard, but he's not as bad as Hannity. Hannity's the worst.
At least Mark Levin is intellectually honest when it comes to Trump.
Yeah, all right. Let me go to the chat, see if anyone's there in the live chat.
Well, I mean, I used to have been more loyal to Mark Levin, like in the during my childhood, but as of recently, I mean, I don't know. I guess some of his clips on YouTube are when he goes talking about libertarians like Rand Paul and even atheists for that matter. It turns me off of how he would sometimes alienate libertarians. Like Mark Levin, disagree with Rand Paul all you want on foreign policy. Let's have that discussion. I mean, disagree with him on a whole number of other issues as well. But it's not worth like making him out like the enemy. I mean, libertarians with us conservatives, I still, like, for the most part, consider myself a conservative, but libertarians are allies, Mark Levin, when it comes to, for the most part, when it comes to domestic policy, when it comes to economic policy, maybe not on foreign policy, but they are a valuable ally in the area of economics. And you are doing no good by alienating people, big-time libertarian icons like Rand Paul, for example. And I don't know if you had ever listened to Mark Levin like take on this one atheist caller. I mean, that call has been making the rounds on the internet, Loudmouth. Like where he, what?
I hear.
You know what I'm talking about?
I think I do, yeah.
I mean, the Young Turks like did a response to Mark Levin's reaction on that caller, and I'm just thinking to myself,
oh boy, the Young Turks.
Yeah, and I don't like the Young Turks either. But it was hard for me.
One bit.
It was hard for me to actually disagree with Cenk Uygur when he was responding to Mark Levin the way that he handled that atheist caller. I mean, Mark Levin was acting like the president had to be religious. And really, if it comes to like two candidates who are politically identical with each other, but the only issue that they disagree with each other on is religion, and one is an atheist and one is a Christian, just because of my own religious preferences, I'll vote for the Christian conservative or the atheist conservative. But I would much rather vote for an atheist conservative or an atheist libertarian over a Christian liberal.
Yeah. You know,
the president doesn't have to be an atheist. I do not understand the litmus test on religion that Mark Levin was putting at that moment. I do not know if he holds that same exact position now.
On top of that, we never had a
Jewish. I know. So, he was trying to like make the point, and I'm not the most religious person myself, as he was talking to that atheist caller. Like, is that supposed to give you extra brownie points? I do not see how that extra validates your argument of how the president must be a Christian. But
isn't Donald Trump a Christian? I don't know what he is religious.
He claims to be a Christian, but really, he said that he said in an interview that he doesn't have to ask for repentance from God, and really, that shows a real lack of humility.
Because he is God, damn it! I learned that from Sean Hannity. All right, Sean Hannity show had a whole segment about how Trump is the reincarnation of Jesus, Muhammad, and Zeus all in one. It was really amazing.
No, he was the reincarnation of Hercules.
The reincarnation of Hercules as well. Yes, as well.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah.
The reincarnation of all those amazing figures, and he's like, God, I need that D. I need that D.
Okay, so Zach, so we've covered conservative, libertarian, Christian. Even though this goes to religion, how did your parents bring you up when it comes to Christianity?
Well, they always taught me about how Jesus was our savior, and I was always taught with a religious background. There was one moment that I had come damn close to completely walking away from God. I'm not going to reveal the whole backstory behind that, but for one weekend, I could almost say that really I did not believe that the Christian God was real. Yeah, it wasn't for that long, but yeah, I was always raised with that worldview. In my earlier childhood, I wasn't really taught the evidence behind it. Then I was taught the whole... What?
Well, just in general, how you were raised up behind it. So you got Christian, pro-gun rights, so you're pro-gun rights, capitalism, constitution, private property rights. You're against abortion, social justice, the establishment, authoritarianism, illegal immigration.
Yeah, in explain the way I think video of how, if you were to watch that video, you would know the explanation as to how I became a pro-lifer, anti-abortionist. I guess that's one area that you sympathize more with liberals on, loudmouth, is abortion.
No, I sympathize more with conservatives in general, with some exceptions.
Okay.
Like
yeah, I mean,
certainly support birth control, wrapping it up, or what have you. My favorite commercial is this one kid throwing a tantrum in this a food aisle at this restaurant. The kid puts some candy in the cart, okay, and his dad puts it back on the shelf, and the kid's like, "I want it!" And starts screaming, and I tossing all this stuff, and going, "Ah!" And then the kid says, "Use condoms."
Yeah.
That commercial is the funniest thing ever.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of divulge as well, is that I'm not completely against birth control. I mean, particularly for before fertilization. And
Right.
I'm not entirely, I mean, I'm not legally against abortion before 7 weeks. This is kind of an issue that me and S-Man more passionately disagree on, is abortion, along with religion. Everything else we either very, very mildly disagree, or we all in all agree with each other on.
Yeah, actually, I would say that it seems like we more disagree on religion versus abortion. Like,
right.
Disagree. Like, I disagree. I can agree that the reasoning for abortion in the sense of convenience, I think, is a shit point, but I still think nonetheless you don't necessarily have to justify it. But I think the stronger ones are for the well-being of the mom. I think the well-being, like if she was raped, or if the pregnancy happened because of incest, or if it's a risk to her life, then absolutely I can absolutely empathize with that. And also I think the thing with some pro-lifers, not trying to generalize here, is they don't seem to be able to empathize with the woman who doesn't want to continue the pregnancy. Like, there's some who do empathize and still are pro-life, but it's like they don't. Some of them don't understand where the woman comes from. Like, some of them don't know that no matter what choice she chooses, she's always, no matter if she decides to keep it or not, it's always going to weigh on her for the rest of her life. And some women, keeping the kid was a great thing, and not keeping it was fine. I just think that if we're going to, that you need to weigh all your options before you make a final decision.
Right, and the best way to empathize would be to strongly urge that they don't abort, but at the same time provide financial support. And it's kind of what I do with donating to my the little pro-life group that I have associated with. I mean, I used to protest with them in front of the local abortion clinic here in Wichita, but haven't anymore ever since I've been transferred to first shift on my job. So yeah, I mean, one of the biggest reasons why I still consider myself a conservative is because what is typically associated with libertarianism is a pro-choice stance when it comes to abortion. I mean, there's this one progressive voice fanboy who like responded to me in the comment section of one of Progressive Voice's videos. The title of the video was Dave Rubin gets called out by Kyle Kulinski. How Kyle Kulinski was basically throwing a fit of how Dave Rubin like interviews climate change deniers. But yeah, and so out of left field, Tim Horn just randomly brings up the fact that I consider myself libertarian, but at the same time anti-abortion. And I'm thinking to myself, I said in response,
I don't think they're contradictory. I don't.
What?
I do not think being libertarian and anti-abortion are contradictory.
Yeah, I don't either necessarily, but that's the stereotype. Like in the modern world, if you were to what is stereotypically not associated with each other is an anti-abortion position and libertarianism. I mean, I consider myself, if you were to like give me the proper title, I guess a conservative libertarian would be
conservatarian.
Conservatarian.
Yeah,
okay,
it's an actual term. Like I googled it, and it's like because I was wondering, because I was like, is conservatarian even a thing? Like, or is there a term where it's like? So I googled it, and yeah, there's such thing as conservatarian. It's like if a libertarian and a conservative were to have a love child, you know. But anyway,
it's a combination of the two beliefs. But yeah, I guess you could say more specifically that I am conservative by philosophy, but libertarian for a good portion, for the most part. Conservative by philosophy and libertarian by legality. Like the law should not get involved and intervene when it comes to sex and drugs, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want people to be shooting heroin or crack. I mean, marijuana is a bit of a different story. There's more pros to taking that drug than heroin or crack. I don't necessarily want people engage in their homosexual acts, but that is their right legally. And as far as transgender procedures go, like I said before, I think that it's only absolutely necessary if you have like a legitimate biological intersex condition. I mean, if you just feel like you are the opposite gender, I don't think that taking the transitioning procedures is necessary, but that is your...
I wouldn't say it's necessary, but it's your choice as an adult, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would argue, actually, I do think it is a bit of a contradiction for someone to be against, like if someone wants to repeal or overturn Roe v. Wade, for instance, and call themselves a libertarian, because I do believe it is a right to decide whether or not you continue a pregnancy. I wouldn't say it's like a huge contradiction, but it's a bit of a snag.
No, I'll explain why it's not, okay? Obviously, libertarians believe in the idea of bodily autonomy for the individual, but in the case of that, you have two individuals, and whose bodily autonomy do you favor? All right, the child or the mother, okay? So I would say that you can have either position and not be any less of a libertarian.
Like, I wouldn't say you're not a true... I'm not trying to use the no true Scotsman fallacy and say, oh, you're not a true libertarian, Zach. Bastard.
No, I get you.
Lifer. No.
I mean, Tim Horn was basically trying to pull that on me.
Tim Horn was?
Yeah, I was talking about Tim Horn a little bit earlier in this stream, Progressive Voice fanboy who called me out about how saying you cannot be anti-abortion and a libertarian at the same time.
That's the no true Scotsman fallacy.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered that. Pro-gun rights. For like a few of these things, for me, pro-gun rights, I've just... Like, this whole concept of gun control just seemed incredibly retarded. the idea that it would work, especially when you take a look at some place like Chicago, they have gun control and they're fucking crazy, and these people don't take into account that a lot of these places where these shootings occur, like school shootings or things that terror attacks, they happen at gun-free zones, and it wasn't the overabundance of guns that these things happened. And there have been incidents where people have taken arms against people committing violent crimes, and they're able to prevent it from happening. As it's Zach showed in his response to the Not So Superwoman. So that's where I would talk about gun rights. Capitalism I got involved in over the last year or so, and I did lean a little to the left last year, as I guess I was more in favor of a mixed economy. Then I just slowly over time just got further and further away from being in favor of mixed economy, and now I'm a little more right wing than I was a few months ago when I took that test. It's a flawed test because the questions, how they're worded, kind of blow, and the other part is they don't involve gun rights, they don't involve separation of church and state, they don't involve other things. The religion thing, I get why they put in there, because I do think there's some authoritarian type of things when it comes to religion, like, oh, this person, you can't be moral if you're not religious, or oh, sex outside of marriage is immoral, or I think that's a different part of the test, but like, or just things like that,
Yeah.
Yep.
I want us to
I gotta
address the
take
whole.
off, guys, but good chat.
Oh well,
Yeah.
see you later, loudmouth. Anyway, I want to address the whole church and state issue here in a little bit on this stream, but I want to address what Lonely Wolf said in the Google Hangouts chat. Zach is a conservative on the streets and a libertarian in the sheets. I only pretend to be a conservative, but if all my conservative friends knew what practices I did in bed, then they would be all like, you heretic.
Zach, is it when Google had said Zach was a libertarian in the streets and an authoritarian in the sheets? Is that true, Zach? Is that true? She was in the chat a few minutes ago, by the way.
Woman, you are going to get breast implants if I have to force you to. This is not a democracy. This is a dictatorship. I'm going full-blown authoritarian as to what you can look like. I'm trying to adjust my camera here so it's a little bit higher. I feel like I am slouching too much. Oh, God. I need to fix my posture.
Damn right, motherfucker. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, but yeah, the reason I'm in favor of separation of church and state is, because it seems like there's only one religion involved. Like, for instance,
actually, I want to save that topic for a little bit later. I want to address some to Lonely Wolf before we get too far off topic, if you don't mind, S-Man.
Sure, go for it.
Lonely Wolf, I hope you did not I hope you did not get enraged at the comment that I said about how it's more of a quasi-capitalist position. And okay, my graphics glitched out on my monitor. Damn.
You might want to turn down the bandwidth to audio only on the Hangout. I think that'll help you.
All right, I'm turned back off my camera, I guess. But anyway, yeah, as I was saying, Lonely Wolf, I hope he did not get full-on enraged at the quasi-capitalist, quote-unquote, comment that I made about how it's not a true capitalist position for somebody to be, for capitalism in the areas of luxuries and food and other cheaply acquired items, but then you're for, you sympathize with socialist ideas when it comes to single-payer and minimum wage. I always wanted to see what your response would be on that.
I think that's a reasonable thing to say. It's not that you're more of a quasi-capitalist, because that's really that's an interesting word for it, because that's pretty much what it is when someone advocates for a mixed economy. So that's people like myself, or Cult of Ham, or Millennium Man, who are a bit more on the left in an economic sense.
Yeah.
They definitely wouldn't classify myself as capitalist. I think quasi-capitalist is probably the best. That's probably an accurate description.
Yeah, if you guys don't know, you should know that Mjolnirman used to be quite right wing about a year ago. He used to argue
I saw
for
his video on that.
yeah, he used to argue for right wing libertarianism a lot, and then I think it was because of the election he started to reflect, and ever since he's been in favor. He's been quite left wing now. In fact, I think he's I think he's like I don't. He's not like a libertarian socialist, but he is of the libertarian right. Is at least the impression I got from seeing him on the political compass test.
I mean, some of them are just like some of those far left economic positions. It's absolute madness. I like when you read the Twitter feed and you're thinking like apparently it's not true. Like apparently your socialism sucks if you're like if it doesn't include reparations to people of color.
To me, that's insanely idiotic. Like, I think reparations. I just view it as just. I view that as just the ultimate. You're paying for somebody else's crime essentially by having this reparations bullshit. I think it's quite it's quite pointless to do that. Zach, you alive?
Yeah, I'm alive. It's just I muted my microphone so I could unplug the headphones and just listen to you guys while I was changing my shirt. That sweater was getting hot.
Yeah. So we've covered the what was I saying? We've covered the conservative and libertarian ideology. And I'm going off of Zach's channel description because that's all the ones I can name off the top of my head. So we've gone over conservatism, libertarianism. We did talk about why he was a Christian. I've already discussed in prior streams why I lean to atheism. Capitalism, I just don't think the workers deserve to own the means of production. Gun rights, I don't think. I don't believe gun control.
You also believe that capitalism is a way to incentivize people to not be lazy.
Yeah, I think I am of the belief that if you do not work, you deserve to starve. If you have the ability to work but you don't choose to work, you deserve to starve. If you want to work but you are physically unable to work, then I'd say all right, you don't deserve to starve.
One thing that you can really frown on the Obama administration then is the fact that he repealed the required to work aspect of welfare.
Like, I was pissed.
Yeah, I mean, I do not know or remember the nitty-gritty details of it, but basically, before he had repealed it, I guess people were required to consistently look for work or be working for them to have food stamps. But then he repealed that, and so that just increased the amount of people out of the labor force. So people could be chronic. Oh, damn it. S-Man left the group. But anyway, as I was saying, that just increased the amount of people that could be chronically lazy as far as their work ethic goes. Yeah. I guess we'll get on the church and state issue as soon as S-Man gets back on.
You look at some of those socialists or whatever, like the far left economic that advocate for all this sort of stuff, and it's like because you sort of look at like not all of them, but you just look at some of them like with their appearance, how they've got like these, you know, their facial piercings everywhere. They've got these ridiculous haircuts, like this bright. And just a general kind of look about
they look like spastics.
Look at very, very sloppy, and I'm just thinking, like, my God, like, you know, you can't expect to, you know, for people to want to hire you when you present yourself.
Garbage. The only far leftist I know that dresses decently is Owen. The only far leftist that has a sense of humor and is not a complete pussy when it comes to humor is. Well, there's a few. There's Cultaham, especially Cultaham, Mjolnirman, and Lonely Wolf.
Oh man, Lonely Wolf has the most fucked up sense of humor. What's up, humane?
Hey everybody.
Or inhumane? How dare you be inhumane with Cult of Ham during their minimum wage live stream? Will you stop? Will you stop torturing Ham Sandwich? That's very inhumane of you, Mr. Mind.
Well, ham sandwiches don't have natural rights. So.
I will say this, that we are talking about ideologies and stuff and where we come from on them. For instance, we talked about conservatism and libertarianism. we've talked about we've talked about capitalism and gun rights, and Zach, how did you get to the pro-constitution part of your belief system?
Well, I think I already explained that earlier in this live stream, is that listening to Mark Levin helped me do that, because, like I said before, I'm a Rush baby. I was raised listening to Rush Limbaugh, but he never talked about the issues from a constitutional standpoint. It was purely a political games type of standpoint, like it was all a board game to him or something. But then Mark Levin, I started listening to him more and more, and he talks about everything from a principled and constitutional standpoint. And so I base a lot of my beliefs on the Constitution: pro-gun rights, pro-private property rights, pro-free speech, and pro-freedom of religion, or even from religion if you don't want to associate with any religions.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the freedom. We have to get a clear definition of the freedom from religion aspect, because.
Oh, I can give you that definition, pure and simple. The freedom from religion, from at least how I would define it, is for instance, the choice to not be involved. For instance, kids don't really have a choice. Well, some do, some don't, on whether or not they go to church if their parents are religious. The freedom to, and that is a good thing, like to define freedom from religion, like to have nothing to do with it, to have it out of your life. I would kind of define that as freedom from religion. I do believe that with I'm very much for the freedom for people to be of whatever religion they want, as long as, and to practice their religion in the privacy of their own home or in a public building. If you want to practice it in public, that's fine, but people have every right to practice every other religion they're a part of, or to make fun of your religion, as much as that might trigger some people. I mean, if they make fun of your religion, you could just tell them to, I don't know, to fuck off or something.
The same freedom that allows them to practice their religion is the same freedom that allows you to criticize their religion. It's the same. It's the same set of principles.
Yeah. And Zach, you're anti-establishment. How'd you get there?
Well, Mark Levin and all the people that he supports, primarily, well, I don't know. Ted Cruz has been panned off as pro-establishment and anti-establishment. He's been panned off as both, but. Yeah, Mark Levin, he constantly rails on against the establishment GOP, and so I guess I just basically followed his route on that. And it kind of disgusted me as to how basically the establishment GOP voted for the first bit of funding for Obamacare, like the whole cloture vote. I mean, there was only like a select few, like maybe a dozen senators that had voted against it, but the rest of them, Mitch McConnell, John McCain, establishment schmucks had voted for cloture and for funding Obamacare in October of 2013. But yeah, I want to actually rewind a bit on the issue of church and state. I mean, since we got a humane mind on here, I mean, he's been like duking it out with Cult of Ham in the chat regarding the whole 10 Commandments issue. And where I stand on the issue of church and state is, if you read the Constitution, it says Congress. I'll have to pull it up here, but it says Congress shall not make any law. Okay, here it is. The First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So that tells me that basically the U.S. federal government cannot have any say as to what religious symbols that you can have in like a city hall. The way that I stand is that let the local governments determine on what religious symbols that they want. And that goes for all religions. I mean, even say, for example, whatever city Son of Lucifer lives in, he can his town can have like satanic symbolism for all I care. And then Westboro, Kansas can have all the Christian symbolism that they want if they're the local people, if the majority of the local people agree upon it, vote for it. And then say, for example, Albany, New York can vote to have absolutely no religious symbolism, or even have like an altar to honor Richard Dawkins and so on and so forth. Let the local governments or Christopher Hitchens. Christopher Hitchens is far more respected than Richard Dawkins, is my observation. Yeah. But let the local governments handle it. The federal government should not get involved. The Constitution clearly says Congress shall make no law. And just as a matter of principle, I don't think that the federal government should be getting involved with the local government in that way.
I honestly, I don't see the need to have any religious expression from the government.
No, it's not a need.
Well, I don't see why they should, though. Like, sure, it's not a need, but why do we need to have religious symbols?
Wait. So that you're by applying need to the situation, that's where it creates a problem. So I know you're maybe not intentionally saying that word, but it's should it be banned or should it be enforced? Well, if neither of those cases, then it's just, hey, if they want it, they want it. Right? Yeah, if it's not something that you would ban, or it's not something that you would enforce, well, then it's neutral. Isn't right? That means you can have it if you want, or you cannot have it if you want. It's that to me is how the First Amendment reads. Like, yeah, you can have a religious kind of situation in your government if you want. If not, well, then you don't have to have that. I mean, or at least that's my understanding. But you're saying a need implies that it's either it should be outright banned. Like, you cannot have this monument on city property or state property or federal property. And that to me creates a problem for, in my understanding, because saying that you can't have this whatsoever seems to ignore the intention behind the First Amendment.
Simply put, with religious symbols, I would just I'd have to ask, for instance, people give the example of the Ten Commandments people argue whether or not the Ten Commandments should not be displayed in front of a federal building, and that religious expression has no place in government. Simply put, there's God knows how many religious symbols there are. Like,
God knows it's. Sorry, that's just.
I realize I've grown up around people who use God as I wouldn't say necessarily an insult, but whatever. Simply put, if I were like if I had the power to, I would just have religious expression be kept to in public, like in public places. It'd be kept to your home. It'd be kept to you, whatever building you go to, whether it's a church or a mosque or whatever, or in public, as long as it's not on public property. I would keep it secular, so like, or if we're going to go with keeping the Ten Commandments to be displayed in front of federal buildings, that means we'd have to have all religious items in front of the buildings.
I got a question, because I remember on one of the earlier Josso lives, one of the first ones that Cult of Ham had ever joined on, you and him were basically agreeing on the idea that that religion should be kept to your home and to your place of worship. Am I strawmanning in saying that?
I don't think we said that on the stream, but that is a position I do hold. But so yeah, you're not strawmanning me.
Okay, yeah, I just think so
it's like a dick. It's like you don't need to. It's like a dick pic. You don't need to send it to every single person in the world. It's just like maybe to someone.
Yeah, that's true.
Someone who wants it.
Okay, so what are you meaning? Like restricting people's freedom of speech so that they cannot preach out on the streets, they cannot record on YouTube and post it?
That's not what he's saying, actually.
No, I'm asking you, S-Man, not Lonely Wolf.
Oh, well, that's not what I'm saying. If you're wanting to worship in public, that's fine. If you want to worship, like, when it comes to government buildings, I think they should always be secular, as they should keep out their themselves out of the topic of religion, because that can create a real headache. Also, with this Ten Commandments bullshit, you'd have to say why just the Ten Commandments? What makes it the correct one to put in front of the building? Why not other religions? This is something you also, when I debate Christians, why is Christianity correct when there's a couple, I don't know how many there are, but there's like 4,200 religions. It's like all those religious symbols. What makes the Ten Commandments the correct one? I mean, there are instances where it gets downright petty, the whole topic. Like, I think it was in Pennsylvania. I think I brought this up with Humane. I think it was Humane, about this atheist group that was trying to get this bench removed and replaced with a one that had no cross on it. I think it was at some
Yeah,
cemetery.
it was a cemetery. Yeah.
Yeah, it was insanely retarded and just downright autistic.
Well,
I
according to what you were saying earlier, that is what they should be doing. They should be removing all religious symbols from public property. Cemeteries are the property of the state, so there's a religious symbol there.
I said it was petty for them to do.
But
I mean, like when it comes to government, when it comes to like government buildings, for instance, in front of federal buildings, I would say why just have the Ten Commandments? As for the cross on the bench, whoever installed the bench decided to put the cross there, and it's not and all concede, yeah, sure.
Why is one petty and the other one is not? That's what I don't understand. They're both religious symbols on the publicly owned land. Publicly owned as in, because it's state-owned property. Why is one religious symbol like, oh, they should be allowed to keep that, and the other one, no, they have to get rid of it? Why does one outweigh the other?
All right, well, you can't put so many. There's only so many you could fit on one bench. As for the federal government, like for a bench, like most people are not like if they see a cross there, they're not gonna like start spurging out and thinking, "Oh my God, there's a cross on this bench."
So why do they see the Ten Commandments and start spurging out?
They're very hardcore with being as secular as possible. Now, I don't really. I'll say this.
So if it wasn't a Ten Commandments monument at a courthouse and it was instead a cross at the courthouse, then there should be no problem.
Sure, I wouldn't have a problem because, like with the cross, but you can disguise it as, oh, that's not the Christian cross. That's just a regular. That's not. They could argue it's not meant to be a religious symbol.
Yeah, because originally the cross was like a way of death penalty, basically criminal death penalty for the Romans before Jesus had even arrived. I kind of want to ask one quick question for you, S-Man. Could you clarify what you mean by keeping religion in people's homes and their places of worship? Because
that's a personal preference. Like, I'll explain. Like, I would prefer it if people would keep their religion, like they're worshiping in like their whatever building you go to, or if you go or in your home. However, I would never support legislation to ban you from doing it in public. Like, I would absolutely be against that.
Okay, yeah, that's the part where I got a little bit confused when I heard you and Cold of Ham basically sympathizing on that position. Is that I guess I did not realize that you guys were meaning philosophically and personally you don't want religion being spouted out on the streets, but legally, now that you've clarified it, I know the full context. So sorry for mistaking your position.
No, that's fine. And simply put, it was just the logic of all right, have a good night, Lonely Wolf. Yeah. All right. So as for like my thing is, it's with a bench, it's not like a federal building. It's just a piece of. And also, if you don't like the bench, you have the ability to go to another bench or to. I would simply say I will say it with if the people don't want, like whoever installed the bench, if they don't want to get rid of it, or they could just remove the cross. You don't necessarily need to remove the bench. You could just if you can remove the cross without damaging the bench, go for it. Also, it's not the government. It's not like the government. It's not like there's an issue of separation of church and state by having it on a bench in a cemetery. That's not necessarily like, sure, it's on government land, but I'm not sure if you could necessarily classify the cemetery as like a private property.
It's owned by the state.
Oh, fair enough. I mean,
unless the specific example was a private cemetery, in which case they have no authority whatsoever to remove the bench.
I don't remember if it was
a private business.
I'm going to see if I can find the original story because I thought I don't know why
it has to be on state-owned land. Otherwise, this court case has no. It's actually that would be the same thing as going to a church and telling them to remove a cross off of their property. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I may have found the original article. This is from.
Well, also, if you look at the actual cemeteries themselves, the gravestones often have religious symbols all over them. There are angel
Um,
statues,
so simply-
crosses, pictures, statues of Mary. There's all kinds of stuff in cemeteries. So the tombstones
Yeah, like,
themselves,
so
cemetery,
honestly,
they
I
would have no authority over, but the benches at
I'm
a
trying to-
public facility, they do.
Go on, Esmond.
okay, so this bench was donated. I found the original story. It's from May 6th of this year. This is in Oil City,
Donated?
Pennsylvania. Yeah, it was a donated bench by the veterans of foreign wars more than a decade ago. And it said, men who aren't men who are not governed by God will be governed by tyrants. And while I absolutely disagree with that, people said it was an obvious slap in the face to all the atheists who serve in the military, which to me, this is why some atheists I cannot stand. Because this isn't a slap to the face to some people. Like, I'm an atheist, but I just look at it as like, if you believe in God, cool. As long as you don't use that to justify being a prick, I don't care. And they sent the American Atheists Legal Center sent the city officials a letter warning them against keeping the bench in a public park, and this is just incredibly retarded.
Okay, so it's a public park, not a cemetery at all. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, but I would
The very
argue
fact that it was donated, that's what.
it was donated by the what was their name?
The
Veterans of Foreign Wars. Yeah, like, simply put, I do not agree with the men who aren't governed by God will be governed by tyrants. But that's a different thing for another time. Simply put, it's just a bench, and it's not, and if it was donated, like, the cemetery did not decide, hey, we're going to have that statement there. I don't think there was a cross on it, but I think it just said men who are governed by God will be governed by tyrants. So, like, if it were up to me, if I was that much of a pussy about it, I would rather just, I don't know, either go to another bench or just suck it up and sit on a bench that some people, like, would jizz over seeing it say men who aren't governed by God will be governed by tyrants. Like, this is hilariously idiotic. As for the federal building, it's like, why do we put up those symbols, like the Ten Commandments? I think it was actually declared unconstitutional in Oklahoma. Let's see if I can find it, the specific one. The case, I sent it to Humane, but I don't know what his stance on it. I'll put it in the group chat.
I'm not getting to that yet.
All right, I'll send it to
that because we are planning on discussing this 2 weeks from now. So
yeah, so I won't get too much into it. So I was going to
not this coming Thursday, but the Thursday after that. So there's still a bunch of research that I have to do, but the overall principle of the matter to me is I object to taxpayer dollars being used to construct such monuments. But in the case of that bench, it was donated, so no taxpayer money whatsoever was used, and it was just, hey, this is a bench and we're placing it on the public property. And that seemed to be what the people wanted, but it was not apparently what the atheist people wanted. And so they
I tell atheists all the time to suck it up and deal with it, that it's just a bench. But I'd have to ask what the Ten Commandments were taxpayer dollars used in putting it up.
I believe so.
Then I would.
That was not a federal courthouse. That was the state courthouse, but still taxpayer dollars. So the state taxpayers did, to the best of my knowledge, did pay for that. Its construction and also its demolition or its removal. I don't know if it was actually destroyed. I think it was just moved off of the property and moved somewhere else, like to a church or something.
Yeah. Okay.
But all of that came out of taxpayer dollars, and that to me seems like more of an egregious violation than the fact that it was there.
Yeah. All right. So
S-Man, would you agree with just kind of an overall question? Like, would you overall agree with the position that local governments should decide what religious or non-religious symbolism they want to put up on public areas and not the state or federal government? Or would you say that no one at all should be allowed to do it, be it local or whatever?
I'd probably go with the former. Philosophically, I'd prefer if the states would just, quit with the religion shit and just be secular. But if I would actually just leave it up to the voters to decide, have them vote.
Right.
Like, I personally would keep the religious symbols to, like, your home, your place of worship.
Yeah, that's pretty much my position. Leave it to the local governments.
Well, that kind of creates an issue right here, because technically the state courthouse that was voted on by the local government, and yet it was torn down because of the federal government, right? They were citing the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, as the reason as a reason to take it down. They were citing the Supreme Court cases as, hey, this is why this cannot exist on state property, even though it was voted on by a more local government. Because in my mind, it always, as you go further down the scale, so federal government has the least amount of power, states have more power, counties have even more power than the states.
Or at least the federal government should have the least power.
Yeah, so it should be cumulative, like stacking power. And so the closer you get to home, the more power that group has to for the people underneath it. Or at least that should be, because the federal government is this wide spread out power over the entire population, and the smaller the population size, the more power that local authority should have. At least that is how it's kind of written, and that's how the Constitution was sold to the citizens of the United States, or to the people who actually ratified it. It was like, hey, the federal government doesn't have as much power as the states, and then over time it's gone the other way around, and now the federal government is the supreme power, and states, if states are in violation of the federal, well, then those states are wrong, and they need to change. It flipped on itself.
All right, so we've covered. So the only things left on your list, Zach, are anti-authoritarian and anti-illegal immigration. Now, authoritarianism. We did somewhat. Capitalism, in this ideology stream about ideologies, capitalism. I used to be in favor of a mixed economy, and then I just slowly started getting that out of my way of thinking, and just said, I have no problem with the workers not owning the means of production, because a lot of communists and socialists preach, it's just the workers owning the means of production. And it's like, well, all right, then if that's all it is, then I don't think the workers deserve to own the means of production. And then they'll call me classist, and I'll tell them to eat shit and die, essentially. First of all, they were not hired to do it. Also, here's the analogy I used when I was talking with someone who is a communist sympathizer. I used to do all sorts of landscaping type jobs when I was younger, and they'd give me 5.
Typical Mexican.
Fuck you! I'm kidding. I'm only a quarter Mexican, so I'm not like.
Oh, so you only did a quarter of the job.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, for anyone that is watching, by the way, Humane Mind is a full-on anarcho-capitalist. For us to get a beat on everybody's ideology. Lonely Wolf is like a quasi-capitalist. He said that he'll. I basically brought up that label, and he owned it. S-Man is a libertarian atheist capitalist. Humane Mind is like a non-religious deist anarcho-capitalist, and I'm a conservative libertarian Christian, and of course a capitalist.
I would say I would. I mean, if the term minarchist applies to me, if you think that's what it is,
it sounds like that is the closest to what you've stated so far.
Yeah,
well, I don't know.
I mean, it is a libertarian political philosophy which advocates for the state to exist solely to provide a very small number of services, which I think that does apply. So with capitalism and the owning the means of production, as to the analogy I used, basically the people that would have me do the job, they were either too physically weak to do it, either they were sick, or they're too old, or they're just too lazy. So I was pretty much the only one using the tools they would provide, like the lawnmower, hedge trimmers, weed whacker, you name it. And basically, I was
though they should be yours.
Yeah, I was like, and the guy said you technically did own the means of production, and I said no. I remove it from that. Would I keep it? Would I be the sole owner? They're no longer the owner because they hardly use it. And I'm also of the belief that if a Marxist owns a business and decides that the workers he will share the means of production with his workers, even though I wouldn't recommend it, fine, you do you. Just you cannot force anybody else to do it. I guess isn't there a term? I mean, I'm not an ANCAP, but isn't there a term that follows where you won't force people to do certain things your way? Like as long as they're not hurting anybody else, you will not.
That's just the regular non-aggression principle. That's what it's. It's like as long as they are not infringing on somebody else's rights, you cannot prevent them from doing it.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you would really be a minarchist, S-Man. I mean, no offense, but I recall back on the whole stream talking about the minimum wage, and you seem to been like, I don't know, in the center, kind of sympathizing or kind of believing that we should like keep the minimum wage.
I don't have a problem with keeping it. That's what I was saying.
Okay.
It's like I'm mostly neutral on it, but
okay, I see.
Yeah,
my position is that there are bigger issues than abolishing the minimum wage. But if I absolutely could, I would say get rid of the minimum wage entirely, but definitely not raise it.
But but the fact of the minimum wage could still be a minarchist position, because the minarchist, from the minarchist perspective, it's the least amount of government in order to maintain a stable society. So if minimum wage is a requirement for a stable society, that would fall under a minarchist government. It's the we don't know what the minimum amount of government is. So if we repealed something and society started to fall apart, well, then we would restore it. That's the minarchist perspective: is nothing more than what we need, but nothing less than what we need. So but we don't know where that sweet spot is, where only these rules need to apply. We don't know what rules specifically.
I've talked to people who are minarchists, and I would ask them that, and they would say, the police, the government, like the police, the military, they would keep the roads public. They would keep the mail public, education, things like that. Now, I have no problem with the idea of privatizing the mail. We already kind of do that, actually. Privatizing education. I've been thinking about that, and I've actually met somebody. Well, I already talked to the guy yesterday on a stream for about, it was a 3-hour stream, and he said he didn't necessarily have a problem with it, and he says education. No, wait, it was today's stream with Occam's Router. He says he has no problem with the idea of privatizing education. And me and him then talked about religion and the comment thread, which you and him were duking it out in. Oh, God, that was such a hilarious comment thread. And then you two kept saying to each other, wipe the jizz out of your eyes. Like, what the fuck?
Well, I mean, hey, if you're reading a sentence and then you're completely misrepresenting it, there's got to be something preventing that.
And if we were to like achieve a true anarcho-capitalist society, basically no government, I think I have a few ideas as to how people would transfer the water and electricity utilities to meet that kind of a society. It's like basically make all the buildings run on large batteries that people would replace on a consistent basis. As far as water goes, that would be a little bit more difficult, I would think. But like maybe large water tanks that people would refill every now and again. But yeah, that's the way that I would think of it.
There's people who have their own private water supply. Like it's the water supply for their area. They clean it themselves. They have their own septic tanks, it's a self-contained system. People already have that right now. So they're off of the public grid as far as water. And usually people in that situation, because they're more rural, they also have their own power generation. They usually have a generator on their property, and they either, burn some type of gasoline or whatever to keep that generator going.
I'm actually quite fascinated with the philosophy of anarcho-capitalism. I'm just not fully convinced of it on the whole military aspect of it, because some tyrannical dictator could easily pick off each individual anarcho-capitalist, or even take them all on at the same time, because they have little to no organized army, whereas a tyrannical warlord, he has his own army. And this applies to anarcho-communism as well, which makes it ridiculous as to why Owen MacDonald says that communism requires no government. Actually, it does, as long as evil existed. Yeah. As long as people exist, there will always be evil, and so there will be like tyrannical dictators. I mean, what if, say, for example, you have your own little commune where everybody shares the means of production with everyone, but then there is like big megacorp. He had his own private army and decided to conquer the commune and like make them their slaves. That would be a required area for government, like a government to like make a military to fight off the big corporations. I mean, I obviously disagree with communism, be it anarchist or authoritarian. Either
I think
one
it
I
just
don't
is
like.
authoritarianism. I think anarcho-communism is an oxymoron. I've interacted with people who say anarcho-capitalism is an oxymoron, and it's like, well, first of all, in order to maintain.
Oh, just lost them.
Damn it. Okay.
But yeah, so the anarcho-communism in reality is a contradiction of terms. It's an oxymoron. But theoretically, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Okay.
S-Man, does your internet keep on crapping out on you or something?
It says the computer goes to sleep or some shit like that, which it's like, no, it's not. If it went to sleep, the screen would have been black. That sounds racist, but whatever.
Right, so you're talking about anarcho-capitalism. And
yeah, they were
not
arguing.
An oxymoron.
Yeah, it's like I don't see like it goes off the non-aggression principle, and with communism, the only way you can maintain it is if you have someone force you to participate. I've spoken with ANCAPs who say that you'd have the choice on whether or not you participate in ANCAPistan, but under and the I don't know what you'd call it, ANCOMistan, whatever you want to call it, you have no choice. Like in order to maintain it, you have to force people to do it.
And this is when I was talking with Owen in our debate. There was no way to opt out of the system. If I don't want to participate in the system, there's nowhere I can go. There's nothing I can do. I am trapped in his system.
He keeps on avoiding the question of how are you going to make sure that everybody abides by the socialist or communist society? I mean, because people are not just going to freely share each other's stuff with everyone. He cannot address this argument because he knows that it does require some form of government, and if there is a government built up, then that would mean that his idea of a governmentless socialist society falls flat on its face.
Yeah, and simply put, when Zach was bringing, I think he brought that up, and he's like, no one would be able to have private property under a communist society. Like he was just saying, it would not happen. It's like, first of all,
how do you stop somebody from doing that?
Yeah, how do you stop them from doing that? And how is that? And if that's what they want to do, you can't like. It's why I have a hard time believing libertarian socialism to not be an oxymoron. Is
because you have to have more and more authority, which is the opposite of the libertarian stance. Because libertarian is the less authority. It's more towards
less authority the better. And it honestly, he kept just in the live response he did to Zach, me, you, and everyone else on capitalism, our questions. He was such a pissant about that, and especially whenever anyone we would have used the word retard, like JJ and Alexander Kingsfallon did, and Mo ableism.
Ableists.
Even Mo ableism.
Yeah.
I might get called racist now because I try to do a stereotypical I'm such a horrible person. Anyway.
So yeah, we're talking about capitalism, but we're talking about ideologies and how they typically get associated. Like under conservatism, liberalism, what beliefs get typically associated with them all.
Yeah, and then we branched out to other things. But going back to certain topics like that, like if you say, "Oh, I agree with it," or "I lean towards it." For instance, if I tell people I'm right-leaning, they assume I'm authoritarian, right-wing, alt-right piece of shit. And it's like that's not what I even said. So sometimes there's some people, like Humane said in one of his last Humane Mind episodes, he's like, the only reason I'm redacting this name is because there's some people on this side of retarded who will say that, who will try to use that against me. But yeah, there's some people on that side of retarded who absolutely do not understand that just because you are leaning, like for instance, a few months ago, I would have said I'm libertarian leaning, like people would not understand what leaning means. Like some states are Republican leaning. I think they said South Carolina is Republican leaning, and it's like that doesn't mean they're full blown for it. You know, it doesn't. Like if people can't understand that, then I think they should have been swallowed before then. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. You know, some people don't even have any idea of what libertarianism really is. Like, there's this one coworker that I have who is like in his middle ages, and he asked of what candidate that I was supporting in 2016, Republican or Democrat, and this was around the time of when the libertarian primaries were still going on. Ted Cruz had dropped out. Bernie and Hillary were still duking it out, and so was Johnson and Austin with each other. And I said, I think I'm leaning more towards supporting Austin Peterson. But by that time, the Kansas caucuses had already passed, and I could not vote for Austin Peterson in the Libertarian caucus. But anyway, he didn't even know what libertarian was. He was all like, and I said, well, there's like different extremes of it. Like the extreme of libertarianism is anarchism, which means no government. And libertarian basically means little government with your own personal freedom, not being intervened in, like sex, drugs, guns, how you are to run your own family, as long as you do not kill anybody or rape anybody within that family unit. Yeah, I did not explain it quite that articulately. I mean, I was kind of fumbling over my words at the moment, and yeah, he was all like, do you even know what you're talking about? Because I kept on stuttering and whatnot. But yeah, one of my sisters viewed my recent video, Superwoman is Super Wrong on guns, and I think that one of the things that she might have not understood is when I mentioned the title libertarian, because there was the one point that Superwoman, she was all like, why is it that guns are legal, but marijuana and gay marriage aren't? And I asked, is she really assuming that everybody that is for gun rights is against gay marriage and marijuana? Like, holy crap. I mean, I realized that her video was made like back in 2013 when politics were more black and white, conservative versus liberal. And basically there was hardly any mixing of ideologies in America. But now the ideologies are more jaded than ever.
Even back in 2008, libertarians were making a huge impact, because I mean the Libertarian Party got its huge support through the Tea Party movement. That was when it got national coverage and started to get better polling numbers. But
still, with a good percentage of the populace, you would probably mention the term libertarian, and that people would probably still be more like, what? I mean, if you were to talk about political ideologies and politics in general with Generation Zers or millennials, they'd probably be all like, what's a libertarian? They probably only know the two main ideologies of America, that being conservative and liberal. But I think that as more and more America gets more and more jaded, that people will understand, jaded in its political beliefs, that people will understand the different ideologies more and more. But
as for, and I also want to ask some questions, if you guys don't mind, about like where your family would politically lean. My family's pretty politically diverse. I have two parents who are who are Democrats and left wing. They're not like communists or anything. I have some relatives who are like distant family who are quite right wing Republicans, and probably would have a horrible foreign policy. But that, not trying to generalize, but I think one of them said they would bomb the Middle East or nuke it. So thank fuck they're not going to run for president or anything. There's some who are like, some that are politically independent, some who I think were like of the Reform Party or something like that. I think one voted for Jill Stein, and like not like tactical voting, but voted genuinely in favor of Jill Stein. So
my family mainly consists of Tea Party-esque conservatives, like the type of conservatives that believe that the marriage should be kept traditionally, that believe they're not like, okay, I'm trying to like get a full-on grasp. Like, I guess they're more towards the right than me when it comes to the issue of church and state. I mean, when it sympathizing with Kim Davis more, I guess.
She's a public official, but well, with public officials, and like I feel like it wasn't really about, like, sure, you can say it's religion, but she's like a public official. If it were more of a private business owner, if Kim Davis was not a public official and she was more of she was just some this cake baker and they were trying to force her, I'd say no, she has every right to say no, I'm not serving you. But the fact she was a public official, she has to serve everybody. She's not a private business owner. So I get where they're coming from on the whole religion thing. I just thought at the time I'm like, okay, you're a public official. If you were like a private business owner, I'd be on her side. But she's public, so she has to serve everybody.
There is a little bit of nuance with the Kim Davis situation where she joined as a public servant prior to that being the law of the land. So her current duties. So yeah, when she started serving, her current duties had no violations with her religious beliefs. She was serving, and she was not even supposed to be the one issuing the marriage certificates. That was not part of her responsibilities. The people who had been previously doing it all quit, and she was the de facto, like, hey, you're the only person authorized to do this sort of thing, and now we've changed the laws so they no longer coincide with your beliefs. And she kept asking for somebody else to take that position, to pass that off. She's like, hey, I've got no problem with if somebody else does it. So this was. I mean, if you look at the whole story, and not just what the mainstream media was saying, like, she was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place where she's saying, hey, I don't want to participate in this. Give me something else to do. Move me back to what I was doing and put somebody else in here. But the government officials or whatever, for some reason, were just, I don't know what was going on or what their excuse for why they wouldn't get somebody else to do it. Why would they wouldn't be like, okay, we're going to temporarily give this person permission to do marriage certificates so Kim Davis can go back to doing what she was doing prior to all this.
So she was asking if else who was more of a pro-gay position than her could do the marriage licensing instead of her.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, I kind of think all in all that maybe Kim Davis should quit if she doesn't want to cater. Well, I can understand if she doesn't want to pander out to other people's sins, if she really thinks that homosexual acts is a sin, well then just quit. But yeah, I don't see any problem with, hey, can we get a different official over here?
Yeah. What ended up happening is she was forced to quit, even though she didn't want to quit being involved in the government at all. She just didn't want to do that aspect of it. So that's...
Yeah, she should have just quit then, but yeah.
Well, I mean, when you
mean to get off on too much of a tangent. But
but when you've got your pension on the line, you're like, hey, I've spent 15 years in government, another, you know, I don't remember how long she had spent in there, but when your retirement is banking on your career, it's kind of the situation where I wouldn't want to leave the government and, you know, all that's wasted. All my progress towards my retirement is now completely gone. That's the situation that I saw she was in, is that, okay, you're forcing her to leave her position in the government, and so now she doesn't, anything she was building up towards her retirement is gone because of you changed the laws during her service. That, to me, is a kind of like, what other options does she quite have at that point? Because she was eventually forced to quit, and as far as I know, doesn't get any kind of government pension or compensation towards that retirement. When you're in government, you don't have a 401k. You don't have, your retirement is the pension that you're supposed to receive once you've served your term.
Okay. Yeah, I did not mean to get on too much of a tangent regarding our own religious traditionalism.
Yeah.
But Humane. Sorry, yes, man. Was there something that you wanted to add on top of that?
Yeah,
I
was going to point out that after like a few years, like same-sex marriage is no longer an issue. Weed is somewhat becoming less of an issue, but the federal government keeps putting its nose where it doesn't belong.
Yes.
And essentially, until I would argue having put it to a vote. All the people for it, all the people against it, and it should be more of we should vote on the issue, because it's that controversial apparently, or at least. Well, that
leads to the problem. That's my inherent issue with democracy. Is if everything is up to a vote, well, then all it takes is a vote to violate somebody's rights, which is what we're seeing right now. Is these things are passed by vote, even though they are in violation of people's rights.
All right. The whole purpose, though, that we have different branches of government is so that they could keep each other in check as far as powers goes. Plus, we have a constitution that says you do not have a right, Mr. Government Official, to take away other people's rights, which is kind of an oxymoron. You have the right to take away other people's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the Constitution, is to keep democracy in check, saying, hey, you can vote on all of these other things. You cannot vote on these issues. These are fundamental. Doesn't matter if 100% of the population wants to get rid of or wants to enact a religion or get rid of all religion. That you can't vote on that. You cannot vote on, if you want to, you cannot vote on having everybody be able to free speak or have everybody not be silenced and censored. That's not up for debate. It is a fundamental right that everybody has a right to free speech.
Well, actually, I want to sympathize with you that I do disagree with the idea of democracy because it's basically straight majoritarianism. I agree with republicanism, like little r, governmental republicanism, not the party.
That the Constitution establishes the United States federal government as a republic. That's what differentiates a full-blown democracy from a republic. Is a republic has structures on which cannot be changed by vote, which is what the Constitution is supposed to do. Although amendments to the Constitution and laws have been passed that actually go against what the Constitution says. So it hasn't done a good job of keeping things in check.
Yeah, and as for jaywalking, that was a horrible analogy Superwoman made. It's like, what? You do not. First of all, if you want to harm yourself, as idiotic as you are for wanting to do that, I'll just say at this point, if you know you're not supposed to jaywalk and you get hit by a car, I have no sympathy for you. You knew better and you did it anyway. So it's not a right. So basically, there was no hypocrisy she kept trying to bring up. And simply put, I was like, this girl literally probably, she didn't even go on to the topic of, like, she went on to gun rights and she's like, less guns in general means less that you will not really need a gun. And it's like, so she doesn't understand there's a black market. Like, if we
does she not understand that even if we eliminated all guns from the world, there's still crime?
Have you seen the video, by the way, Humane?
I don't know if he has.
I have not seen the video in question, but I understand most of the talking points when it comes to gun rights. But if we had a magic wand and all guns are removed from the world today, you have not eliminated crime. Crime still exists.
I mean, nobody would die by gun, obviously, but still.
They find other means of doing it, like, well, I mean, explosives or knives or automobiles.
You'll have mass stabbings with a giant broadsword instead, and then people will be calling for the banning of broadswords.
Or what about rapid fire crossbows? It's not a gun.
Is that a real thing?
Yep.
Oh.
Rapid fire crossbows? Yeah.
Okay. I thought that was just a cheesy thing that Shrek 2 was trying to put in the movie.
No. There are crossbows with a clip.
Cool.
Yeah.
I never known that.
So usually they have a ratchet mechanic. So there's a turn system where the ratchet pulls the string back and then snaps it and pulls the string back and snaps it, and it goes through a clip of bolts. But I mean, usually there's only like 5 or 5 to 8 in the actual clip. But you could have a rapid fire crossbow, and then we'd actually crossbow mass shootings. You'd have the same problem, even though it's not technically a firearm.
Yeah,
and if that's banned, well, then they'll go to archery, and just straight up regular bows, what are those called? Compound bows. And when those get banned, well, then they'll go to regular bows. When those get banned, they'll throw rocks at each other. And
the super depressing thing about the Superwoman's video, here I'm going to pull it up, is that the stats are depressingly in her favor. Like, seriously. Okay.
Right.
Okay, yeah, of course, but it still means that so many of her tween girl followers are brainwashed. I don't typically like using the word brainwash, but I think that can accurately be applied in this circumstance, is that so many of her tween girl followers are easily brainwashed by this flimsy-ass logic that she is using, and suddenly people are sympathizing with her. But yeah, over 230,000 views, 9,000 likes, to 317 dislikes. Like, seriously, you would think that the internet is typically pro-gun rights. I mean, if there is typically a video that is speaking out against gun rights, the like to dislike ratio will be unfavorable in that person to that person. But in this case, somehow Superwoman managed to get fairly positive ratings on this video. I really wish that I had come across this video. I really wish, actually, that I had got involved in politics in the YouTube aspect back in 2012 so that I could, like, respond to this video in the heat of the moment, like, right after she had made it. But now I'm basically striking the iron when it's cold 5 years later.
As for, and she also brought up religion, which she didn't touch up upon, but it was just the guns. It was like,
oh, crap.
Damn
Lost
it.
him again.
God. I think I know what he's about to get to. Like,
it's net neutrality, man. It's
yeah. Yeah. So. Okay.
Wait, what was that?
That was me, like, pulling back up the video so I could, like, view the chat. There's absolutely nothing happening in the chat. I'm viewing it on my phone. But yeah. Oh, okay. I want to ask.
I accidentally closed the tab, so it's my fault this time. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I want to ask Humane a quick question, then you can get on with Superwoman regarding her religious spiel. Humane, as we were asking both myself and S-Man of what our family political compasses are, what is generally your family political compass, if we can ask?
Yeah, like super conservative. I mean, that.
Okay, so generally.
So immediate family, like my dad used to listen to Rush a lot. He would play that anytime he was at work and, you know, at the house and all that sort of thing. Conservative talk show radio like that. Pretty religious background overall for the majority of my family. So religious in that area. And that's why, like I was talking to S-Man in our stream on Thursday, where I was saying I used to be staunchly against gay marriage. And then someone suggested the government shouldn't be involved in marriage at all, and that kind of flipped my view. And I used to think, oh, well, that makes me kind of left-leaning in that regard. But the more I'm researching this sort of thing, the more of my understanding of politics in general and philosophy, the more I'm like, oh, no, that actually is more in line with my view on natural rights. So it's actually a more right-leaning position if the right is individuals and the left is collectives. Because
there's another way of looking at the political spectrum, like instead of left versus right, have it like authoritarian versus libertarian.
Well, that's the up and down. The left versus right is separate from
some people
libertarian versus authoritarian, because you can be on the right and be so that you're on the right as far as this is how we need to preserve freedom and we need to have this much authority in order to preserve individual freedom. Or you can be on the left and say we are all a group, and in order to maintain the group, we need to have a group of people governing the entire population. So you can have left and right and up and down. Those to say that that authority is on the right or authority is on the left it doesn't quite make sense.
Well, my point is that typically people look at it as purely linear, left versus right. But imagine if people were to look at it purely linear, libertarian versus authoritarian. That would kind of shake things up. Because I don't even get why the political compass test says left, right, and then authoritarian and libertarian. Because if we were to purely look at it linear, authoritarian versus libertarian, and apply economics to that issue as well, leftists would essentially be economic authoritarians. I don't even know why that is not somewhat associated as a form of authoritarianism. Being for higher minimum wage, or being for single payer health care, being for subsidies in this business and that business, free college, and banning oil, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that by necessity has to be authoritarian in its stance. So I'm not sure if the economic portion of that actually plays on the political compass test.
I don't think it does.
Does this require a law? If it requires a law, that's more authoritarian.
Yeah, and The problem is, and Zach illustrated this in his video on the political compass test, that they don't include anything about gun rights. I would like them to include the separation of church and state, gun rights, and affirmative action. I would really, because that'd be interesting, because I don't like affirmative action. And what I was going to say is that the logic of gun rights, her logic was, the less guns we have, the less need you'll have to have a gun. I can't remember how she put it, but it was insanely idiotic. Because I'm like, how do you get that line of logic? If there are less guns,
less guns available means less people will need a gun.
Yeah, that's all you need is to cite one instance of rape where the rapist did not have a gun. Oh, okay. There were no guns in that situation, so there was no need for the victim to have a gun. What?
Yeah. I mean, she was all like, direct correlation. But then she completely forgets about, like, that kind of instance that you mentioned, Humane. Like, what if there's just somebody, like, 3 times your size that was looking to mug you or rape you? That you would definitely need a gun in that instance, because like, it's not like
well, if I add a gun to this situation, then that's going to cause more violence. And I'm like, no, it's already a violent situation.
It's not like your bare fists or even a knife is going to take down the guy, because he's 3 times your size. He's got more muscle than you and just more strength in general. So he's more resilient against your punches and your itty bitty stabs.
Yeah.
But if both people were armed with guns, well, then even if the guy is 3 times your size,
it'd be a little bit more even.
You still have a more equal chance because you're both using firearms. Yeah. So a bullet from a 90-year-old grandma still has the same effect as a bullet from some like a LeBron James type dude.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, a gun from each of them, a shot from each of them has the same effect on each other.
And also regarding capitalism, I got a lot of my inspiration regarding capitalism originally from listening to Mark Levin, because, like I said, Rush Limbaugh did not teach politics from my principal position. More like it was a board game to him. But
no, I just want to specify, I didn't say LeBron James because he's black. I was just trying to think of somebody who's like really big and athletic. I was gonna say Brock Lesnar, but I wasn't sure if anybody knew who that was. So.
Not quite, but I think we get the gist of it. You racist white supremacist.
Yeah.
It says, Zach, you have like a buzz cut, so you can't even talk about white supremacists.
Yeah, I think I captured my buzz cut real well with my profile, the way that I pixelated it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I got a lot of my inspiration from Mark Levin, and then the more and more I watch videos on YouTube, I came across some videos of Milton Friedman and somewhat of inspiration from Ben Shapiro, but I guess Mark Levin would be my main inspiration regarding capitalism. Oh, damn it, S-Man.
Speaking of Mark Levin is the main honcho behind CRTV. And did you guys hear the awesome news about CRTV? They're getting Roman. Yeah, Roman Millennial is one of the new 4. The other one, what was her name? She's been on the Daily Wire program a lot, and I'm drawing a blank on the name. But yeah, there's like 4 people.
Antonia Okafor?
No, she's not. Oh, wait, does she have a CRTV channel?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just mentioning the name Antonia Okafor because
so there's Roaming Millennial is getting a show called Uncensored, and this other woman is getting a channel called The Conservative Millennial. And then there was a third guy who I've never heard of or seen before, but he's getting a show as well. And I don't remember who the 4th one is. It might be her.
S-Man here said that he got his inspiration from Mr. Dapperton and War Corp 666 regarding his belief on capitalism. Who would you say that you got your inspiration first from, Humane, to have your beliefs of capitalism?
So Ron Paul was a big one, and then I started looking at Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell. Then I started looking at Milton Friedman's son, David Friedman, is a huge anarcho-capitalist. And then I started listening to Tom Woods, Stefan Monalou, Peter Schiff. And then I got into the whole Rothbard and von Mises and Hayek. So, I mean, a whole bunch of influences on all that sort of thing. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else who kind of, because like, if you notice, all of those, with the exception of maybe Ron Paul, are all economists. So Stefan Monolou is a philosopher, but huge on economics. I mean, he's got more lectures on economics in general than most other people who are economists. So, and he got his start on Peter Schiff's radio show. So with the exception, I mean, there's a few exceptions, but for the most part, all of their lectures and all of their philosophy has a huge portion based on economics in general. So that's what got me into my view of philosophy, was studying economics. But I mean, I could also cite Aristotle and Socrates before him as, hey, those are my influences. Yeah. So, but the one who started it all was Ron Paul. That's when I started really getting into this, because he's the first person that introduced me to Austrian economics and more of a libertarian mindset in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, why I took inspiration from War Corps and Mr. Dapperton was they would explain, like, and I even saw War Corps's hour-long response to the biggest communist on YouTube, Maoist Rebel News. It was and War Corps looked like the stereotypical redneck at the time, which was kind of funny. And he would, every communist argument he would address, and essentially, and I felt like I think he's more intelligent than what people give him credit for. Like, whether you like him for his stance on abortion or religion, I think he does make his points very interestingly. And he would address the points. He wouldn't use ad hominems. I was glad that he would address the point. As for Mr. Dapperton, it did make me go towards minarchism at the very least. As I used to think the only way we could survive in this world is with a strong military, a strong government, and then realizing that no, that's probably going to lead to more problems. I think it is a lot more authoritarian to want a really, really, really strong military. I think it was I'm trying to remember who it was, but I think it was Mitt Romney who said that he'd create a military so strong no one would ever dare challenge it.
Ali Stuckey is the name of one of the women, by the way.
Yeah,
and Andrew Wilco.
Yeah, I've never heard of Andrew Wilco, but Ali Stuckey, I've seen her on the Daily Wire and Roaming Millennials. I'm like, yay, more roaming content, and to which, Loudmouth is going to be like, oh, I hate her. She's hot. She's such a terrible person. And I'm like, I don't see it. I think that's more of a personal vendetta.
I think he has a hate boner for her. I think he's no better than Vegan Gaines.
So all right, you heard it here, folks. Loudmouth wants Roaming to rape him with a cucumber. It's official.
Loudmouth wants to kill Mr. Repsion. That's official.
Really?
Yep.
Mr.
He wants to make sure that.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, because you say that he is no better than Vegan Gaines, but
okay, because Vegan Gaines wants to kill.
No.
Really, I think that's a very, very unfair comparison of
Well,
it was a joke.
Actually, he wants to kill. No, Loudmouth wants to kill Bering and AIU. That's all it does.
Yeah, I guess those would be his arch nemesis.
Yeah.
If he kills Bering, he gets to take his woman, right? Isn't that?
I don't know. Probably.
You keep what you kill. So you kill Bering, then you get sugar tits. All right.
I'm actually pretty. I was actually right before starting to stream. I was in the middle of listening to the footage, the necessary footage to make the response to Bering regarding how he took Loudmouth out of context. Like, I'm not the most up to date when it comes to YouTube drama and all these YouTube personalities duking out with each other.
Paying attention to yesterday's drama. Oh, what a fucking shit show.
Oh, what was that all about?
Right.
V versus Kraut and T.
Yeah, Kraut and T. That whole situation. Oh, it's not just V versus Kraut and T. It's like the entire YouTube community versus Kraut and T, based on jack shit. Absolutely nothing. There's accusations and all this crazy nonsense thrown, and the people flinging the mud to start off with are the alt-right assholes. And you're like, wait a minute. The alt-right assholes are confusing, or are saying that. I can't say that they're the origin, but the first. I'm trying to track it to its source, and the first source video that I can think of is that that French guy that V had linked to, like his video. So that seems to be the source of all of this, but it's being perpetuated by people like Coach Red Pill and this Braving Ruin dude. I've seen one video with him in a stream, but I have no idea who he is. But they're perpetuating these accusations that are baseless, completely baseless. There's no evidence of doxing. There's no evidence of smearing. There's no evidence of trying to get people's channels false flagged or shut down. And yet these are the accusations being thrown at Jeff Holiday and Kraut. And you're like, wait a minute, this does not add up here. Jeff Holiday, just not even a fucking month ago, was bashing on Red Pill Black for having a doxing website. And now you're saying, oh, but he's been participating in one for 4 months. What? What kind of fucking world does this make sense? And
Jeff Holiday?
Coach Red Pill is accusing Jeff Holiday of deliberately doxing Coach Red Pill. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. These two these two facts don't add up. Jeff Holiday was criticizing someone for doxing, and you're saying not only is he actively participating in it, he's the main culprit behind your dox. But for some reason, Coach Red Pill wasn't doxed, or was, hey, I'm going to be doxed, so I'm going to release my information beforehand. And then now he's accusing people of citing him as somebody who has released their stuff online as evidence that they were going to dox him. And you're like, what? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You can't say I released my information and people are talking about how I released my information. That means they were going to release my information. You're like, what?
Yeah, it's hard to keep track of the whole doxing situations, be it Kraut and T or Bering or anyone.
Yeah, that's the other thing is Kraut and T, like he was one of the main people behind the attack on AIU. He was talking about how he and his brother were doxxed and are now on an Antifa hit list in Germany. And I'm like, that you're saying that same person is trying to put people's names on that Antifa list. And you're like, in what world does this make any sense? You are either saying that Jeff Holiday and Kraut and T are absolute hypocrites and insane people, or maybe it's more likely that all of this is overblown and the server is what they said it was. I'm kind of leaning more towards the server is exactly what they were saying the server was.
Yeah, and this whole stream is talking about mainly about ideologies, and the YouTube is real diverse when it comes to ideologies.
It's
like you have all the alt-lighters, the alt-light people, and the full-on alt-right people. Like I don't know, would no bullshit fall under like alt-light or something? I mean, in my
it's a little difficult to tell. He seems to be, if he is alt-light, he's like on the border between alt-light and alt-right. Whereas I'd say somebody more like Lauren Southern, she's more towards the middle of the alt-light. And I would even put Brittany Pettibone in the alt-light. Although
I think Milo Yiannopoulos would technically be considered like alt-light. I've actually been accused of being an alt-light wannabe in my video responding to the whole "it's not okay to be white" people.
I personally don't have a problem with the alt-light. I'm
somebody in the chat that said Kraut and Jeff are hypocrites. Listen and believe, said by privilegey shitlord. And if you look at this guy's profile, he's got like Emperor. Not Emperor Palpatine, but Chancellor Palpatine from Star Wars with thug life glasses and a bong hanging out.
Yeah, that chat is definitely tongue in cheek. The listen and believe. Somebody made an accusation. They have no evidence. They've provided nothing but, it's ridiculous. And yet people are like, oh, this is definitely true. And you're like, what?
Yeah, and the thing that makes it hard to pinpoint about all this YouTube drama is that basically you're going off of, a person's word on all these accusations. Like when it comes to an issue like crime statistics or economics, you have like a scientific source like the FBI, for example, for crime statistics, or the Congressional Budget Office or the Bureau of Labor Statistics for like economic statistics. And then but for freaking Kraut's, what the fuck?
This dude's channel.
Oh god.
That's That's alternate facts and Crown T apparently.
Okay.
Thumbnail one of his videos.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
anyway,
that was too funny.
as I was saying about the analyzing YouTube drama, it's a little less scientific than analyzing economics or crime statistics, because basically it's just you go off of a person's word. Like, for example, this whole I fucking forget the name of the website, but the instance with Candace Owens Red Pill Black, it all started with Tree of Logic analyzing an old trailer of Red Pill Blacks, and that's where it started. And everybody has been basically going back to her as a source, when really the same people that did not agree, that the same people that are relying on her as a source for the whole Red Pill Black instance, Digital Autopsy, that's the name of it, did not believe her regarding race realism. But even then,
same people object to her and don't like her as a person, and they're like, but she's definitely credible here. And you're like, wait, what? When has she been credible in the past? Like, what kind of resume does she have where you're like, I hate her and she was accusing me of false things, but here she's definitely right. And you're like, in what world does this make sense?
Yeah, but
like someone who has a history of making false accusations and making blatantly incorrect statements.
But there is a little bit
outright believed here. Yeah.
Even then, there's a little bit of a nuanced difference between the whole race realism and the Digital Autopsy issue. Is that with Digital Autopsy, Tree of Logic was the source of it all, but with the race realism issue, Rage After Storm was the source of it all, and not even her was she the not even was she the source of it all. It was fucking what the fuck was that alt-right website called again?
Daily Stormer.
Yeah, Daily Stormer was the source of it all.
But race realism, or at least that sort of thing, has been going around for a while. It's not starting, like, YouTube didn't start race realism. Race realism has been in psychology for years. And statistics back up that perspective. That's why, like, that was, so when I was on the Warski Lives, like my appearance on there, that's what we were talking about. And I'm like, to argue against race being a real thing just seems absolutely absurd to me. So if you're saying, oh, those are race realists, you're like,
oh, so you're saying
race doesn't?
S-Man?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna go. And as always, but thanks for having me on. And as always, Zach likes Superwoman. Till next time.
Yeah.
Fuck you. God.
Yeah. So
we can talk all day about YouTube drama now.
Yeah. But the issue, and this is what I think Crown T has come into a problem with, is people assume, okay, you say that there's a genetic component to IQ, and there's a genetic component to or at least there seems to be a correlation between race and criminal behavior and that sort of thing. And they're like, oh, well, that means that, we have to separate society and whatever. Like, and Crown T is coming out like, oh, I don't want to be racist, so I have to disprove race realism. And you're like, no. That's idiotic in my opinion.
Yeah,
I mean, disprove race realism because all of the evidence is in support that there are genetic differences between races, which more than just skin color, there are huge differences between races. I mean, huge is, I guess I should say I got to clarify, huge as not in, gaps that can't be bridged, but huge as in noticeable and definitive. Like when you're taught, like sickle cell is a huge one for this, where there's very few people, or the majority of people with sickle cell are of African descent. There's also some Indian and what was the other one? I think and Arabic populations that also have sickle cell. But it is very, yeah, it's a type of disease, but it seems to be very limited based on race. Like it is so rare if it at all exists and amongst the Anglo-Saxons and it's typically considered the white race. So rare that it's not even like doctors don't screen for this in white populations. But if you're black, well, they definitely screen for it but if you're denying race realism, you're saying that doctors shouldn't do that and they should either screen everybody or they should only screen or they should not screen anybody. And you're like, no, that's stupid. That's idiotic to come to that stance. So there are differences in race And there is a genetic component to IQ, which that's something Kraut seems to be arguing against right now, is like, so you don't think retardation has anything to do with genetics?
Yeah, the thing that okay, Bass FZZ. I do not know if you ever watched his response video to Rage After Storm, but I thought it was the most articulate. Yeah, he had the most articulate response to Rage After Storm. He wasn't denying the science and statistics behind the correlation of IQ and the different races, but he was handling it differently. Like, what proves
and that's where it needs to be handled.
Yeah, what proves you not to be racist is not denying the statistics, but how you handle them after you come figure out the correlations of them all. But with alt-righters, they seem to want to use it as a justification to say, oh, you shouldn't be having interracial relationships and whatnot. And that's where I really diverge from alt-righters. I even saw in the comments section of one of the alt-right or one of the response videos to Rage After Storm I saw in the comment section, somebody was all like, I do not want a whole bunch of mystery meat, supposedly. Like, what the fuck, dude? Somebody said that, like, it's harder to get an organ transplant. It might be true, but if you are mixed race, I mean, it might be true, but it doesn't justify restricting a person's liberty for a white guy to make out with a black woman if they want to.
Well, here's another example: blood type is something that is across different races, but blood type can also affect your ability to receive organ transplants because if you're of a certain blood type, and you need somebody of the same blood type in order for you to be a compatible organ donor. That crosses racial lines. So I don't understand what people say. Oh, if you're a mixed race, you're going to have a harder time. Yeah, if you're of a certain blood type, you're going to have a harder time. And blood type you can't control. To me that argument is idiotic, and it's that does not seem to be like, oh well, this is why you shouldn't read. Like, there's a lot of things because blood type could be either of the parents in most cases. So that means that if you're of one blood type, you shouldn't date somebody of a different blood type, because then your child might be of their blood type, and then you won't be a good organ donor for them. That's stupid.
Yeah. Right? I also want to address the whole IQ issue. Somebody mentioned that the IQ for African Americans in like sub-Saharan Africa is lower than that of African Americans here in the United States, which kind of goes to show that there might be like a correlation between low IQs and some minorities, but it doesn't mean that they're stuck with it for all of eternity. I mean, culture.
That to me shows a huge environmental impact on IQ.
Yeah, it's environmental, it's cultural, and whatnot. So yeah.
So
which doesn't justify, which kind of debunks the whole justification for the alt-right's agenda regarding we must prevent minorities from immigrating into here because we must keep our white ethno-state and blah blah blah. That bullshit.
Well, I mean, because when you're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, like, think of the timeline here. It's less than 400 years. That is not enough time for a huge, significant genetic change, right? 400 years is nothing when you're talking about evolutionary biology. And yet a 15-point difference in IQ is huge for a population. So to attribute the African population in the United States increased by, average being 15 points higher, and saying that is trying to say that is due to genetic differences is insane. I don't know any biologist who would be like, oh yeah, that's definitely genetic, and here's how we can prove. Like, no, to me that points to clear evidence that environment can have a much bigger impact on increasing education than gene manipulation, at least from our current understanding of it. So I need to. I'm working on various scripts on this because all of this, the whole Kraut and T situation, kind of circles back on everything that I've done up to this point. So it seems like it's kind of fortuitous, right? Because this is a free speech issue because it's concerning doxing. It's a race realism issue because that's the purpose of Kraut and T's server. And it's also a smear campaign of people perpetuating incorrect information as if it is valid and if it's true, from sources that they wouldn't otherwise trust. So I mean, this is like the trifecta of everything that's wrong with the YouTube community right now.
Yeah, I mean, originally I was thinking that I don't want to bother subscribing to Crown T because everybody misconstrued. I guess everybody misconstrued his whole talking about where Rage After Storm was hired, which organization she was hired by. People were misconstruing that as he was endorsing for her firing and whatnot. But yeah.
The other thing is, okay, so about that particular blog, well, not only was she not being, it wasn't a paid position, but the purpose of that site was political opinions. This was not like she had a job at Microsoft making programs, or she had a job that was
or she had a job at CNN specifically to smear Trump.
Yeah. If somebody had a job and their job was at CNN to inform people on it, and they were spouting things on the blog that were contrary to that organization's public opinion, yeah, that's grounds for being removed, right? So it was a blog for UKIP, which is a political party, and they politically they have to spout their ideas, and they have a specific stance on issues. And if one of their contributors is saying something that is absolutely against their stance, then they have every reason to let them go. But something like, say, Google with was James Damore. Even if he was an outright misogynist and hated women and was spouting all this stuff about women, that does not affect his job at Google. You don't need to interact with women or have a loving, caring relationship with women in order to create programs. The two should have no bearing on one another. So even if he was a member of the KKK, Google should not be like, oh, well, that's grounds for firing, because his belief in that regard would have nothing to do with his job. Whereas Rage After Storm, her beliefs are exactly the purpose of that blog position. You can't separate the two.
Yeah, so, and you go talking about your live stream with the Warskis, and pretty much the only reason why I'm remaining subscribed to the Warskis is that I find them to be a little bit more intellectually honest than bearing. I mean, Lerma said that Andy Warski is as dumb as a doorknob. I mean, that might be true, but that's kind of part of his character. He's like a larger version of War Corp 666, basically, and that's what makes him so entertaining. But regarding his supposed intellectual honesty, as I pan him off, I mean, you remember, like, back in 2016, he was making response videos to AIU regarding his doxing and the fact that he was smearing anyone that dared support Trump or dared jump on the anti-SJW bandwagon just because more popularity. And Andy Warski was all like, are you saying that I don't really believe in these things? Fuck you, AIU, and so on and so forth. I mean, he makes response videos to AIU. I mean, I don't think Bearing has made any responses to AIUs, which is why that I say that the Warskis are more intellectually honest than Bearing, particularly when it comes to, for example, the AIU drama. But what really turns me off is that he actually goes out of his way to invite AIU on that very stream that you were on. I mean, I don't hold anything against you regarding being on the same stream as AIU, but the fact that they went out of their way during live stream to actually invite him on it. I mean, it just makes me think, are these guys going back on their intellectual honesty? I mean, are they actually cozying up with AIU like too much of the skeptic community is?
So as far as I know, the Warskis have never made a video about AIU doxing, and they have never associated him with that. So they did object to him attacking them based on their beliefs. But they are still open to having him on the show because in that particular area, he's made a lot of videos talking about race and all of these different issues. So I understand why they invited him on. But to me, when you're actively participating in something that is, it's not just a difference of opinion. Doxing is not a difference of opinion. It is a specific behavior that is not allowable. And so they may have disagreed with AIU when he criticized them and all that sort of thing. that would give him a, yeah, sure, there was a disagreement, there was a fight, that hey, we both view things differently, but you're still welcome on our show. I could see that happening. But if someone was convicted of murder or, you know, rape or like, you know, that sort of thing, inviting them on the show after the fact, that would be intellectually dishonest. If you're like a forgive and forget for someone doing something atrocious, which in my mind, doxing, while not as extreme as murder and rape, is still a violation of morality, and inviting someone on your show knowing that they've participated in that sort of thing, that to me is intellectually dishonest.
So yeah, I mean, oh God, what was I going to say? Oh yes, I know that Andy did not make any videos specifically talking about the whole AIU drama, but he was still going against them, and he mentioned as to how that was one of the. He did not make a full video analyzing the doxing drama, but he just mentioned it up about why that is one of the reasons as to why he dislikes him. He said he likes him because of his anti-SJW stuff and other issues. I'm going to take that as an implication regarding atheism, but he dislikes him for his asshole attitude towards a lot of people and his doxing. But it seems kind of like he walks back on that with the invite. I want to ask you, do you think that Andy, well, if you search up on YouTube, he's made at least 2 response videos to AIU.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out, because that is more of an indication of intellectually dishonest. So like, hey, you're doing this morally reprehensible thing, but since I agree with you on these other areas, you get a pass.
You never known that Andy Worski had made response videos to Devin?
Oh no, I've never. This is the first time hearing of that, so I'll have to check those out.
Oh fuck.
Yeah, do you have links to those so that way I mean, if you don't, I can look them up myself, but.
Well, they're fairly easy enough to find on YouTube. But now, since I'm telling you this, that Andy has made a couple response videos to AIU, would you think that
if he was aware that they were more than just rumors, then that is a clear sign of intellectually dishonesty.
Okay, so like, then at that point you would say that he was unprincipled for inviting AIU onto that stream you were with them on.
Yes. If he knew that there was legitimacy behind it and he chose to ignore that legitimacy, that is a clear sign of, you know what, if this was on the left, I would use this against you. But since you're on my side, I'm going to say that it's bad and don't do it again. And you're like, no, if this was somebody, if AIU was arguing for SJW and he was using the same tactics, everybody would be ripping him. Everybody in this community would be, you know, just down his throat, pointing out how doxing is terrible and, oh, you can't do that sort of thing. They would be moral policing him out the ass. But they don't, because he's like, oh, but he talks, and he's, you know, talking about anti-SJW, and he's talking about, you know, he's making points against the alt-right and all that sort of thing. It's like, that does not justify the tactics he uses for it. Oh, okay. Yeah,
okay. So yeah, I think this might be the kicker for I don't know, unsubscribing from Andy Worski.
Yeah, I have already unsubscribed to him over how they handled the Red Pill Black situation.
There's 2 videos right there.
Yeah. While I don't think that was intellectually dishonest, it shows a seriously shallow level of investigation on their part. And I kept talking to them. I kept sending them messages on Patreon. Kept sending messages on Twitter. I'm like, you guys aren't doing a very good job of investigating things, because I'm easily disproving what your points are with 5 minutes of research of my own. So it shows that you're not investigating this properly. You cannot do that. You have to have investigatory rigor, because if you're doing this here, it shows that you've probably used the same shallow investigation techniques everywhere else you've ever made a video.
So basically what your stance would be on the whole Candace Owens digital autopsy situation would be is that she was in the wrong for creating the website in the first place, but she wasn't an actual doxer.
In my view, and I this is going to be part of the videos I'm going to be making this week. So I'm going to make one. I think I'm going to break it up into 3 different parts. One video talking about free speech in general and why doxing is such an abhorrent practice. Then I'm going to talk about the red pill black situation, and then I'm going to talk about how it all ties into the Kraut and T thing. Red pill black and those against her were all in the wrong. I mean, there's no winner here. Everybody is wrong all around the board. So red pill black was wrong in what she was attempting to do originally, but everybody else is wrong on what they were saying she was doing. They are misrepresenting the entire situation. There's nothing. And then red pill black shot back with speculation of her own. That is, it created what should have been a simple misunderstanding became this huge overblown issue where both sides just started. So it started off with a grain of something to criticize, and it blew up to people criticizing things that don't exist. That like they were making false accusation about her, and then she would fire back instead of refuting those false accusations with false accusations of her own. I'm like, this is insanity. Neither of you are discussing the core of the issue at hand because you're talking about all this overblown bullshit that is stacked on top of it.
It's kind of sad that I'm gonna have to unsubscribe from Andy Worski, but I guess that's for the best then. But
I mean, yeah. I'm not here to say that they're bad guys. I think Chris Worski is really intelligent. I'm using their stream because they did a 3-hour-long stream where Aiden Paladin and Kraut and T kind of had it out where they were talking about this issue, and that to me is a vital. If they hadn't had that stream, most of the information about this wouldn't be coming out.
I guess
so they do provide us. Yeah, they do provide a service, and I think of the two, I think Chris should have his own channel outside of Andy Worski, but that's just me, because Chris is way too intelligent, and I think Andy is kind of holding him back because Andy seems to be the more emotional of the two, and while he's funny as shit, but he has a tendency to say something is one thing, and even though there's evidence to the contrary, he will either not bother with that other evidence, or I mean, I don't know. I see at this point it's hard for me to determine how exactly Andy is viewing this thing, because I've been sending him information concerning the red pill black situation. I don't know if he's been ignoring it, or there's too much going on. So, I mean, I could understand me being a small-time YouTuber, not really well-known. I sent you stuff and you ignored it. Oh, how did you ignore it? I can understand it being overlooked. But the fact that he could have easily investigated, and yet he's relying on Suit and he's relying on all these other YouTubers to do his investigation for him, that to me is a problem. Because he's trusting they got it right. Dave Cullen, I think, is a really intelligent guy as well. But Andy Worski was basing his stuff as like, well, Dave Cullen is saying this, Suit is saying this, obviously they have it right. They've done the investigation, and I looked at their investigation, I'm like, their investigation, they didn't do shit. They looked at YouTube videos, they saw it like, oh, this is definitely proof, and I'm like, that is not. Nobody in this situation is doing their due diligence.
It circles back to how YouTube drama is hard to analyze in comparison to economics or crime statistics.
Well, it's the same. I saw in that situation the same thing that happens with news media outlets. One news media will make a story. Other organizations will look at that and be like, okay, this is definitely true because that original source did their due diligence and investigated this properly. And so then it's spread around on all these different news agencies, and they're all reporting off of each other, and none of them is going back to the original source and be like, wait a minute, this original source is full of crap. There's no way this is a legitimate source. But that doesn't happen. And it's the same sort of thing that I'm seeing right now in the YouTube community is there's an original source, and that original investigation, they might have been like, oh, this is definitely true. Like, so this is Tree of Logic. She's looking into this and it's like, this is definitely what was going on here. And now other people are looking at Tree of Logic and they're like, and they just start circulating those same false talking points and like, well, this other person is circulating that talking point and this other person is circulating that talking point. I can just piggyback off of them and I'll know I'm in the right because they obviously researched this thoroughly. That I came to YouTube to escape the mainstream idiocy of circle jerking each other. And I can't, and now I'm seeing circle jerks going on in YouTube, and I'm like, that's something I can't support. I mean, I really like some black guy, but I hate his username. But I really like Derek. I think is a really intelligent guy, and I think he was the most even-handed on that situation. But even he participated in this, and he's the one I was most reluctant to withdraw support. I mean, I withdrew financial support from all of these YouTubers: Blair White, Andy Worski. You know, I don't think I was contributing to Bunty King, but I know I definitely had considered it. But this is like, now I'm not going to in the future. So I mean, some black guy, I withdrew. I unsubscribed to all of them, and I withdrew monetary. Like, and Blair White especially, like that was the one that was like this. That was the one that was the worst because she was actually on Rubin Report, like repeating false information, repeating information she knew. Wow, I'm saying she again. Old habits, I guess. He knew the exact opposite of what he was saying there because I spoke to him on a live stream debate, or not a live stream that he was doing in a moving truck. I you know, I was citing evidence. I was saying, you know, this is what's going on. He acknowledged it, had read it, and whatever, and you know, and
so you're actually on the same. So you're actually on the same hangout as Blair White.
I was not in the hangout. This was in the live chat. I sent several super chats explaining the situation, talking about what's going on and how this is you're incorrect on this information. Let me help you see. I've got, like, I spent weeks on this investigating, and I've got sending all kinds of documents and stuff like this. And
did she actually see it?
Yeah. So no, in the super chat, I was talking about that, and instead Blair White was like, "No, I've got this. I understand exactly what's going on." And then she goes on, the, you know, Rubin Report and is repeating the same misinformation that cannot possibly be true. And in that debate, he admitted that Social Autopsy was not a doxing site, and then later on was condemning Candace for running a doxing site. And I'm like, you can't acknowledge, okay, yeah, technically it wasn't a doxing site, and then still condemn them as if it was a doxing site. That's what Blair White did in that debate. The other thing that Blair White did this is what killed it for me. Blair White said, okay, it's not a social, it wasn't technically doxing, but people used information from that to dox, therefore you are responsible. That is throwing the entire YouTube community under the bus, because if what Candace was doing with Social Autopsy can be held, if she can be held responsible for that, Blair White can be held responsible for his channel. Every person he makes a video on, name, face, why you should criticize them. Bearing, name, face, why they were wrong. Why people should criticize them. Name, face, why people should criticize them. Name, face, why people should criticize them. Blair White was saying, Candace, you had a site with people's names and faces on it. People can use those to attack people, therefore you are responsible. Everybody in the YouTube community makes videos about people with their name, what they said that is stupid. So if Candace is responsible, everybody in YouTube is more so responsible because they've got more than just a name and a face. They've also got what they said and did, which is...
Yeah, I might have to make a video bringing out my opinions on how and why I think that the skeptic trademark community is corrupt.
Yeah, so
how they become corrupt.
Yeah, and for some reason, on the live stream after the fact, everybody's like, "Yeah, that was a good point. That was a good." And I'm like, no, that is not. All of that throws all of you under the bus. You are not allowed to criticize anybody on YouTube anymore, because if one of those people you criticize gets doxxed, according to what Blair White said and what you all apparently agree to, you are accountable for that. If they make a video about Riley Dennis, right? Riley Dennis, they say, "Oh, Riley Dennis is stupid." That is Riley Dennis's legal name, to the best of my knowledge. That is a video of his face. So if someone was to dox them or, you know, come in, you know, enter his break into his house and beat the crap out of him, you know, well, everybody who made a video about Riley Dennis is now culpable. You're now responsible for what happened to Riley Dennis, because that's the same logic they used to tar and feather Candace Owens. The same logic they should all be held accountable to.
I don't think that mentioning a person's name and showing their face is near as bad as showing like contact information or a home address.
Okay, so that's what came out, is the social autopsy did not have all of that. You could not access that.
Did not have home addresses?
No, you could not. It was names and faces. That's what they were criticizing her on. Now, it's correct to criticize on what the site could have become, because what the site could have become was exactly what you're talking about. What the site could have become is a place where you could look up somebody's personal information. It never got to that point, so you cannot tar and feather her based on what it could have become, though. Right? You can criticize and say, no, that was wrong, and she even admitted, yeah, that was wrong. I didn't think it through. It was a mistake. She's said that several times. And yet they still want to they still want to condemn her based on that. You can criticize because it was stupid. Yeah, that was a stupid thing. You shouldn't have done. Shouldn't have even started down that path. Yes, but you cannot condemn her for it.
Didn't you know intentions are bad, though? We convict people based on their intentions.
Well, that's the other thing, is people keep assuming.
I was being sarcastic there, by the way.
But no. Well, even so, you cannot assume someone's intentions are evil. That's what happened in that situation, is they were assuming the worst of it. Like, she was deliberately doing this. She knew exactly what she was doing. And I mean, this was what Triologic was saying. Is like, oh, well, now she still wants to do this, and now she's just taking money from conservatives so that way she can still do this. And you're like, you cannot know that intention. I don't know how you can say that you know that intention, because you are not in her mind. You don't know what's going on behind behind the eyes. You don't know what's going on in Candace's brain. You cannot say for certain that's what she's intending to do.
I think we might have pissed somebody off, because I just found out that this stream has a dislike. Oh well.
Oh well.
These issues get controversial when we're talking about big time YouTube personalities. Like, let's talk more about
it's probably because I said
he boost my own ratings.
No, it's probably because I said he when referring to Blair White. And like, oh, that's an immediate dislike. And I'm like, look, if I'm going to call Riley Dennis a he, I should be able to do the same thing for Blair White. Like, nobody's like, oh, how dare you call Riley Dennis a he? Or at least nobody in our community. But everybody's like, how dare you say Blair White is a he? And you're like, it's the same situation.
I would head and refer to a trans person based on how well I respect them, I guess. I mean, Justin Dennis, I have absolutely no respect for him, so I do not give a fuck of how much Owen McDonald wants to call me a transphobe for referring to him as he. Blair White, I'm kind of on the fence with that, but Xiaomi, I would just primarily out of respect refer to her as she. I mean,
I don't know Xiaomi well enough to know one way or the other. I've been trying to avoid that because I'm still trying to assess whether Xiaomi. Right now, I'm kind of neutral on this situation, so I believe right now I would call Xiaomi he, but I've never interacted with Xiaomi and talked about this sort of thing. I have talked about this sort of thing with Blair White because I was in Hangout streams with him when I was a patron. So I was on several Hangouts. It was 2 or 3. Because it's a patron reward to do the Hangout, or whatever, and there's like 9 or so people in there.
I think we can both sympathize with Lonely Wolf when he says that he finds more substance in smaller channels. He can find more civility with smaller channels than with the larger channels. Whereas with the larger channels, it gets too ideological, it gets too dogmatic. But smaller channels are a little bit more down to earth, like you and me and him and S-Man. I mean, I hope that if the day were to ever come that you and I got up to 50,000 or 100,000 subscribers, that we did not become unprincipled, hypocritical, intellectually dishonest like Bering and apparently even Andy Worski is right now.
Well, that's the issue. Is smaller channels have to rely on knowing the truth and being the bearers of truth. The bigger you get, the less reliant people have. They start. This is what I think. This is pure speculation on my part, but this is why I can say with mainstream media, this is they got their start by spreading actual news and the truth, and the bigger they get, the more they're relying on name brand recognition. We said this, therefore it is true. And I think the same thing happens in YouTube community. Once you get over a certain number, you start to think, this is what I believe, therefore it is true. This is what I've said, this is what this is how I'm seeing, therefore it is true. And it's, instead of relying on finding out what is true and reporting it, they seem to fall into that category of, I'm the one reporting it, therefore it's true. They're relying on all of their past, and they're relying on their reputation to make something true, as opposed to, hey, this is true because it's true, and I'm just presenting it to you. Like there are people who seem to be rising above that. Like Philly D seems to be the biggest example of this. Even though he's got like over 5 million subscribers, he is dedicated. If you look at his source lists for his videos, there are 5 or 6 or 4 or 5 sources for every story he's talking about. And he does the honest thing of, he says, this is what I'm going to show you, shows you the thing, talks about the issue, and then gives his opinion at the end. And this is something I've noticed in my own videos where I have not been following that model, and I'm trying to hold myself accountable and hold myself to that standard.
So you would think that...
provide your opinion, your perspective of it at the end.
So you would think that DeFranco is one of the more intellectually honest big YouTubers out there?
Yeah. So even though I disagree with him on like probably like 20 to 30% of the stuff he presents,
right?
As far as his presentation of it, that is how you're supposed to do it. He is like, I hope he gets his own news channel and continues using that model.
What do you overall?
That is the only way to be mostly objective about things, is you present people, you say this is my opinion, and then you ask for theirs in return. That's beautiful.
What do you overall think of Sargon of Akkad? Because one thing that I've noticed about Sargon, speaking, he does not get involved too much in YouTube drama. I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why I find him a little bit more bearable than Andy Worski or Bering, is because they get too much involved in YouTube drama. Plus, they dry on content. I mean, that would be another good reason why I should like unsubscribe from Andy Worski, is because he's really running dry on content to talk about.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
Since the end of the social justice wars and the end of 2016.
Yeah. So Sargon has a backup plan. And that's why I think Sargon is one of the better examples in the community. So while he doesn't have as many subscribers as someone like a Philip DeFranco, he I think is doing this the correct way. So while he got his start in the Gamergate and he's got his start criticizing social justice warriors, he's moved on to different topics. And he has the foundation for it, because he's talking about philosophy, he's talking about economics, and right now he's doing an amazing job of tearing down communist arguments. And he's actually, like, he did an interview with Yaron Brook. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's the I don't know if he's the chairman of the Ayn Rand Association. And so they had this really, really good in-depth conversation about objectivism, which is something that, like, that I guess when I was talking about my influences, I forgot to mention Ayn Rand, or Ayn Rand. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name exactly. But,
I think it's Ayn Rand.
Yeah, but her philosophy sort of thing is a huge shape of why I believe what I currently believe, because it's what led me to people like Murray Rothbard and von Mises and Hayek. And so the fact that Sargon right now is interviewing people like that and getting those perspectives out there to his audience, he isn't criticizing, like, he isn't relying on criticizing the current enemy. He is saying, okay, I can criticize people where criticism is due, but I'm also providing information about other points of view, about other things. And that's something that a lot of the skeptic community has not found.
Yeah.
And this is why I have a problem with skeptic in general, because skeptic is saying, that's not true, 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 that's not true. It's never pointing to, okay, this is probably true, or this is true, or it's pointing out how everybody's wrong, and it's not trying to find what is right.
I guess that is how I would like find people like Sargon of Akkad, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, more respectable than the rest of the skeptic community, is that they go talking more about economics and government politics rather than just constantly beating the dead horse that is feminism and social justice culture, when really the social justice wars had died ever since the end of 2016, but definitely halfway through 2017. Like, these people need to move on to a different subject. I mean,
well, that's what they're doing right now, is they're transitioning from social justice to the alt-right. But yes, so that seems to be the trend right now, is now it's the alt-right is the new enemy that needs to be beaten down and all that sort of thing. Although they're not having as much success with beating down the alt-right, because the alt-right does have is not as easy to debunk. So because they spent so much time debunking the stupid, idiotic arguments of the social justice warriors,
it also doesn't help that the alt-right is highly more influential than social justice warriors on the internet.
So while I think the alt-right is ultimately wrong, they do at least try to make coherent arguments, and they do a pretty decent job of building logical arguments, although there's severe flaws in their logic. Whereas social justice warriors, they're relying on completely emotional arguments. And so I think the skeptic community has had a really easy time beating down emotional arguments. And then when they come to the alt-right, they're like, these guys are making intellectual arguments. I don't know how to fight that, because I've been fighting easy targets for years. So
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, low-hanging fruit, and they've gotten used to beating on low-hanging fruit.
You'll never learn how to climb if you keep on going for the low-hanging fruit. You'll never learn how to climb and reach the high-hanging fruit if you keep on going for the low-hanging fruit constantly.
Yeah. So I think Sargon is a good example of rising above it. So I think Sargon is another good example of rising above that and starting. I think Roaming Millennial, like, even though Loudmouth has some kind of vendetta against her, I think she is an example of somebody looking at, not just bashing other people and not just being a part of the skeptic, but has risen above that. And I think being a part of CRTV kind of proves that, hey, she does have some substance behind what she's talking about. I mean, it's not definitive. Like, oh, once you get a CRTV, that means you're definitely, rising above the usual skeptic community. But I think it does add some credence to that, right? If she's being recognized by, it adds some kind of legitimacy to what she's doing, and she's not just repeating the arguments of other people. She's not just part of the circle jerk. At least that's my opinion. And I do have to go. It is almost 4 o'clock, but I did want to say something. So because we started talking about Blair White, and he's referring to Blair as a he. There was a good period of like more than 6 months where I did respect Blair White, and I was referring to her as she, and I got myself into the habit of using she, and I talked about this in my various videos. But after the Red Pill Black situation, I'm like, I cannot retain that same level of respect. So out of obligation to my principles, it doesn't make sense for me to criticize you and your actions and say that you are ruining your reputation, and then continue to show respect by calling her, or by calling Blair a she, by using female pronouns. And I'm like, no, if I am adherent to my principles, I have to remain neutral and show not disrespect for Blair, but zero respect. Call Blair a he. If I was showing disrespect, I would call Blair a stupid fucking dick, right? That's disrespect is insults. Disrespect is insults. Proper pronouns is neutral. Using someone's, respecting someone enough to use their pronouns is actual respect. Or at least that's my position on that. And but I do have to go. Thanks for having me on. Sorry that this kind of got. But this is all the stuff that I've been looking at over the past couple of days, and I am.
No, it's all right. I mean, I don't analyze a whole lot of YouTube drama. It's nice to hear you and Loudmouth go talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, even
so
though
this-
you two kind of divulge from each other, you two at least pay far more attention to YouTube drama than I do.
Yeah, so this week I should be recording at least 3 videos. I don't know when they'll be edited and out, but I'm
That
definitely
would be cool to watch.
Yeah, because right now my school schedule, there's the winter break, so I don't have school again until January. I'm going to take the time I would normally use on school to make my videos,
Okay.
so at least I'll have them recorded. Editing may take longer, so maybe it may be 2.5 weeks before something actually gets to my channel. But
One last thing that I want to say to you before you get out of here is that even though economics is a hard subject to talk about, and it really is hard, I would still rather hear a person go talking about that now rather than constantly talking about social justice. Like around the time that I was making my Owen McDonald has zero credibility video, and that was kind of revolving around the whole gender spectrum bull crap. I was just down and depressed. Like I would much rather be reading a Forbes magazine article on economics. And I guess that's another reason why I dislike Andy Worski, is because the fact that he criticized Forbes magazine, say that they're all untrustworthy just because of that one dickhead, Dan Spinelli. But yeah. Skip the community to you. Focus on a different topic. Focus on economics, governmental politics, and you'll remain relevant. Otherwise, you are going to die by the end of 2018. And,
and I want to say one last thing here, because this is part of why. So I mentioned Sargon, because Sargon, this is one of the big criticisms. A lot of people are saying you don't understand economics. You don't understand economics. And Sargon, he started researching economics. That's what he's doing right now, is he's seriously devoted to understanding economics. I mean, that is amazing, because all these other, that's what's causing him to succeed, where these other people are failing, is people are saying, hey, you don't understand this topic, research this topic, and they're still just circle jerking, whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to stop the broadcast right now. Thank you, Humane Mind, for joining us. As always, you are very insightful. And to everyone out there, thank you for watching. And this is Zach Edwards of Strike Force signing out.
All right.